Chapter 48. Yuhiko did not leave the stage after winning. She stood there staring at a person in front. Everyone followed her line of sight and noticed she was staring in Gustav's direction. "Gustav, I challenge you to a duel," she voiced out while giving Gustav an intense glare. "Oh, finally she's making her move." Gustav stared at Yuhiko with an aloof expression, while internally he was smiling. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The surroundings became noisy as everyone heard that. They had not expected Yuhiko to suddenly challenge Gustav, but this was a battle they wanted to see. Every one of them on the second to the last floor had heard about how Gustav easily defeated Masuba. They didn't have access to the third floor, so none of them even had the chance to see Gustav, talkless of seeing him battle. They wanted to see with their own eyes if the claims of him being strong was authentic. Most of them, after seeing Yuhiko's battle with Masuba, believed that Gustav wouldn't be able to win, while some of them didn't jump to conclusions yet after comparing the time it took both battles to finish. They all stared at Gustav with anticipation, waiting for him to accept. "I refuse," Gustav stated, and turned around to head towards Masuba. The sudden refusal shocked everyone. He refused the duel? I guess he's too scared after Masuba got defeated. I would be scared too if I had to go against Yuhiko. What a coward. Why is he called the strongest then? Voices of displeasure could be heard coming from the crowd as they stared at Gustav, who was standing in front of Masuba at the moment. Surprisingly, Gustav was not in any way moved by their comments and glares. He stood in front of Masuba, who had just regained consciousness and was still seated on the ground. "My pay." Gustav stretched out his hand towards Masuba as he spoke. Masuba nearly fainted again. "At least show a little concern." "I'm just regaining consciousness." Masuba was speechless. "How much is it?" Masuba questioned while gulping down spit. "Precisely 236 seconds, which is approximately 4 minutes. That brings the entire amount to 30,000 rad. Gustav held his chin as he spoke. "I wish you'd have lasted longer in the battle, but I guess I'll just have to make do with this," Gustav added with a slight look of disappointment. Masuba almost puked out blood on hearing that. "Pay up, you're wasting my time," Gustav shamelessly demanded. Masuba nodded and brought out a blue cube-looking device. He handed it over to Gustav after standing to his feet. "Gustav, you coward, accept the duel," Kira, the chestnut-haired girl, shouted out from behind. "Not worth my time," Gustav voiced out as he turned back around. Yuhiko could see the aloofness on his face, which annoyed her even more. "Duel with me, you trash. Are you scared of losing?" Yuhiko finally snapped and shouted out. "Why is she barking?" Gustav said with a casual tone. "Unfortunately, I don't have time to play fetch." His manner of talking was so smooth that his statement didn't even sound like an insult, which made Yuhiko's face twist even more. When did he become like this? Yuhiko couldn't understand, and she kept staring at Gustav like she was seeing another person entirely. You. She gritted her teeth in anger as she pointed at Gustav. Gustav walked past the stage, ignoring her actions. It would seem he was heading back upstairs. "What would it take for you to duel with me?" Yuhiko turned around while asking as she stared at Gustav, who paused in his tracks after hearing the question. Finally speaking like someone who has a little brain, Gustav grinned as he turned around. "My demand is very simple." Gustav started speaking, causing everyone to place their attention on him. "He probably will ask me to go out with him. I just have to make Sue." Before she could complete her thought process, she heard Gustav speak again. "Money," Gustav answered bluntly. Silence. The whole place became silent again after hearing Gustav's reply. Yuhiko felt her intelligence was being toyed with. Is he being serious right now? Everyone had a thought similar to this running through their minds. "How about we make a bet?" Gustav added with a charming smile. 5 minutes later, Gustav was standing on the stage. In front of him was Yuhiko. They were positioned about 20 feet away from one another. Yuhiko glared at Gustav intensely while Gustav returned her glare with a calm stare. Supervisor Bola asked if both of them were ready, which they reacted to by nodding. "Let the duel begin," Supervisor Bola said with an authoritative tone. Everyone had their eyes intensely focused on the stage. "I won't waste time in crushing you." Yuhiko, who seemed to still be greatly mad at Gustav, had a pebble in her hand from before the duel even started. Immediately the go-ahead was given, she threw out the pebble with speed towards Gustav. Shui. Unlike her duel with Masuba, she threw the pebble not only with more force but also increased the size of the transformation. It had only been a second since the battle began, yet a large boulder had already covered almost half of the entire stage. The boulder was as wide as the stage, and the speed didn't slow down as it traveled towards Gustav, leaving him with no place to run to. Everyone's mouth was opened wide as they witnessed this shocking scene. This kind of attack would cost a lot of energy and stamina. They stared at Yuhiko like she was a monster, but Gustav's action shocked them. He suddenly dashed towards the incoming boulder. Normally it would be impossible to dodge it, but dashing straight into it was also no different from suicide. To their surprise, Gustav suddenly accelerated to an insane speed that they couldn't follow. Although this is still in its test phase and will probably drain a lot of energy, I will try it out, Gustav said internally as he dashed out. He had activated sprint after dashing out, and was about to make contact with the huge boulder which was moving towards him in a kind of slow motion. His right hand glowed a milky light as he called out in his mind. Atomic disintegration, activate chop. Chop has been activated. Gustav raised his palm, causing the milky glow to coat his entire right palm before slicing down towards the large boulder in front of him. A white line of energy surged out of Gustav's palm, traveling forward along with his descending palm. Before Gustav's palm collided with the boulder, the white line was already cutting through the boulder, still descending along with Gustav's palm. Screeve. The boulder was cleanly severed in two, causing one half to move towards the left and the other to move towards the right. Gasp. The crowd gasped upon witnessing the incredible scene, but Gustav didn't stop moving. He deactivated sprint immediately after dividing the boulder in two, since he knew his energy would be completely spent if it remained activated. Even without sprint, Gustav could move 50 feet in a single second, so closing the gap between him and Yuhiko was an easy feat. Swoosh. He arrived in front of her in an instant and swung out his left arm towards her face. Yuhiko was still dumbfounded by the sudden feat he performed, so she was still looking shocked. She could follow Gustav's normal speed with her eyes, but before she could react physically, his palm was already in front of her face. Pa! A crisp slap reverberated across the place. Yuhiko staggered towards the side after receiving the stinging slap on her right cheek. She could feel the hot burn, which not only caused her cheeks to redden with blood, but also made her sight blurry due to the heaviness. Before she could stabilize herself, Gustav's right hand was headed for her left cheek. Pa! Another crisp slap rang out again. Waha! The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing, and before they could scream out in shock, more slaps continued to echo in the vicinity. Pa! 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 Gustav's hands didn't stop moving as his slaps landed on her cheeks alternatively. Yuhiko's cheeks were already bloodied and swollen, yet Gustav didn't stop. Pa! 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 He kept slapping her around. When he slapped her left cheek, she would stagger to the right where another slap was waiting to send her back to her initial position. Gasp. The crowd was in shock. Dash, he is truly the strongest. Dash, how did he split the boulder? Dash, how can he be so brutal to a female? Dash, does he have no human emotions? Some of them took their faces away in disgust, while some of them continued watching with a look of astonishment. Supervisor Bola, Supervisor Samsuna, you should stop the duel now. It's obvious who the winner here is. Kira ran towards the stage while voicing out with a pale look. As the rules say, the duel cannot end until one of them either passes out or falls out of the stage, and neither of that has happened yet. Oh, before I forget, it would also end if one of them surrenders, Supervisor Bola said while preventing Kira from getting to the stage. But, how is she supposed to surrender in that state? Kira stammered with a pale look as she watched Yuhiko's formerly beautiful face turn into a punching bag, or in this case, a slapping bag. Pa! 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 This will teach you to mind your manners, Gustav said internally as he kept slapping Yuhiko's face. Normally Yuhiko would have passed out if Gustav decided to slap her with his full strength from the start, but he was purposely reducing his strength to stop her from passing out. The slaps were painful, but due to Mixed Blood's tenacity, Gustav had calculated the right amount of force needed to make sure she receives numerous amount of slaps without passing out. The way he speedily stacked her face with slaps didn't give her the chance to surrender, so she could only get tossed around while screaming in pain. He was after causing her more pain and humiliation than just having her take an easy way out by passing out in one hit. Pa, pa, pa. The supervisors were also starting to get sickened by the way Yuhiko was receiving the slaps, but if they tried stopping the duel, they would be contradicting their rules. Luckily for them, Gustav didn't make it any harder than he was supposed to. He stopped after landing another hot slap on her face that sent her crashing out of the stage. Gustav wins the duel. Supervisor Bola swallowed saliva as he spoke. Chapter 49. Gustav wins the duel. Supervisor Bola swallowed saliva as he spoke. Even after the announcement had been made, everyone still stood in place with widened eyes as they stared at the Yuhiko on the ground. Her face was swollen than that of a pig. Her eyes and lips could be mistaken for black and red buns. Her cheeks were bloodied with parts of her facial skin torn off. Her look right now bore no semblance to that of her former. The beautiful face she always took pride in had been turned into this. It was a disturbing sight to a lot of them there. They stared at Gustav, who was responsible for doing the deed. He was climbing down the stage casually after cleaning the blood on his palms. Supervisor Samsuna arrived before Yuhiko and squatted while lifting her head slightly. This young man is truly a brutal type. He showed no mercy. Supervisor Samsuna parted Yuhiko's swollen to place the pill in her mouth. A few seconds later, her face started to heal up. Her eyelids trembled slightly, proving that she was about to regain consciousness. Supervisor Samsuna turned to stare at Gustav, who was walking towards the crowd. Well, this might have been extreme but needed. I'm sure these young kids will learn humility from what they have witnessed today, Supervisor Samsuna said internally. Time to pay up, Gustav said as he got to the front of the crowd on the left. Chatter, chatter. Just transfer the money to this storage device, Gustav said and handed it over to a boy in front. Gustav started moving from person to person, performing the same actions. I still can't believe Yuhiko failed, one of them said with a look of indignation. Now we have to pay 20,000 rad each after losing the bet. This sucks. They voiced out in disappointment, but they had no choice other than to pay the money. The bet was with everyone who supported Yuhiko. They would pay that amount if she lost, but if she had won, Gustav was supposed to do whatever she willed for an entire month. Yuhiko wanted to show that she had more supporters, so she asked everyone to place their money on her winning, and she would compensate them after the duel. These teenagers could have remained neutral and decided not to support anyone, but because they wanted to please Yuhiko, they agreed to her demand. Only Masuba and the two boys that came to meet Gustav on the last floor didn't bet since they knew he was going to win. Masuba was secretly praying for Gustav to deal with her for crushing him. He didn't expect that Gustav wouldn't just defeat her, but also give her the humiliation of a lifetime. All of a sudden, a loud cry was heard. You bastard, how could you do that to Yuhiko? Kira screamed out as she ran towards Gustav, who was busy collecting his winnings. They were only a few feet from one another, so she was able to arrive before Gustav in a second. A red line of light appeared in her hand, which she stabbed towards Gustav's chest. Well, birds of the same feathers always flock together. Since the both of you are so similar, I guess you should receive the same punishment, Gustav said internally as he swerved to the left to dodge the attack while raising his right hand and bringing it down with force. Kira watched as the palm descended upon her face, unable to react to the speed on time. Grab. Just before Gustav's palm could collide with her face, it was grabbed by Supervisor Samsuna. Kira, who had nearly tripped due to Gustav dodging, paused in her tracks. Fights are not tolerated. A duel must be scheduled before the both of you can go at each other, Supervisor Samsuna said. I couldn't even sense his approach with my perception, Gustav analyzed as he withdrew his hand. I was only trying to defend myself, Gustav stated with a straight look. There's no need for explanation, Supervisor Samsuna replied. For attacking a person out of the blue, Kira will have to pay twice the amount of the said bet, he added. Gasp. That's 40,000 rad. My entire allowance for a year, Kira stuttered as she spoke. There's no way I will be able to collect any money from father till the year runs out. Either you pay the fee or leave this premises at once. Such attitude will not be tolerated, Supervisor Samsuna said once again. Kira had a crestfallen look on her face when she saw Gustav stand in front of her again. Pay up. He stretched out his hand while speaking. In a few minutes, Gustav had collected money from everyone except Yuhiko. Yuhiko had regained consciousness some minutes ago. She had healed up and her face had gone back to looking beautiful, but the humiliation she felt now made her feel like covering up her face for life, so no one would be able to recognize her. My payment. Gustav arrived in front of her and stretched out his hand. Yuhiko's face twisted with a crazy look. GRHH. I will have my. I don't care about that. Pay up. Gustav didn't let her complete her sentence. Yuhiko gritted her teeth and reached for her storage device with a look of unwillingness. About 30 minutes later, Gustav was on Miss Amy's hoverbike. Miss Amy was driving him home today. You did good today, Miss Amy said as they streaked through the road. Hee hee, Miss Amy missed out on all the fun. Gustav laughed lightly while holding on to Miss Amy's waist from behind. I really would have liked to witness it myself, Miss Amy replied. Don't worry, Miss Amy. Next time I'll inform you, Gustav said with a smile. Next time? Oh, there's going to be a next time? Miss Amy asked with a bewildered expression. The world is still full of idiots after all, Gustav answered with a look of anticipation. Just be careful and don't get too conceited, Miss Amy advised. H&M, I want, Gustav nodded in reply. In a few minutes, they arrived in front of the building where Gustav's apartment was located. Gustav got down from the hoverbike. Have you considered their request? Miss Amy questioned. I'm still thinking about it. In the meantime, I'm doing more research, so if I do accept, it will be when I have gathered enough knowledge, Gustav answered. It's all right. It's up to you after all. If you find yourself in a situation beyond your control, you know how to contact me, Miss Amy stated and proceeded to speed off with her bike. Swee-I-I. Gustav waved and turned around to head for his apartment. The neighbors outside had smiles all over their faces as they greeted him with a welcoming look. Gustav got to his apartment and settled down on his reading chair. The first thing he did was to bring out his storage device. Tap. After tapping twice on it, 3 small projections were displayed. Gustav tapped on the third one. Zing. Rows and stacks of paper bills appeared in front of him. Gustav smiled as he stared at the money. A total of 480,000 rad. He muttered with a delighted tone. He reckoned that the total amount of money with him right now should be around 630,000 rad. He was now halfway to becoming a millionaire. This would have been impossible if he wasn't dealing with rich kids. A lot of workers couldn't boast of having $500,000 after working for several years, yet he had gotten that in a little over 2 months. Gustav's goal was to accumulate at least $1 million before the MBO entrance test took place. He called for the system interface to open up. Host attributes, he called out in his mind. Host attributes, name, Gustav level, 5 class, EXP, 6250/25,000 HP, 320/320 energy, 120/150 attributes, strength, 33 perception, 31 mental fortitude, 30 agility, 30 speed, 30 bravery, 30 intelligence, 32 charm, 31 attributes point, 14. Gustav stared at it for a while. He had already distributed today's point earlier, and his charm points had also caught up with the others. Things were progressing as planned, but he was still left wondering about the class information up there. Also, he noticed that there was no longer Oslov behind his name. What is this about? Gustav wondered. He recalled something at this moment. The system said something about the recreation ability being operational. He remembered that this was one of the rewards he received after killing the Blood Wolf. He had been wanting to know about the recreation ability for the past 2 months now, but unlike the rest, no information popped up beneath it even if he stared at it for a very long time. He had even tried activating it the same way he activated skills like dash or sprint, but the result was the same. Now he understood that it wasn't operational all this time. Skills and abilities, Gustav called out internally. Skills and abilities, dash, level 4, sprint, level 3, regeneration, level 3, morph, level 3, joint movement, level 3, toxin immunity, level 3, recreation, level 3, bloodline acquisition, Level 3, Chop. Level 6, Palm Strike. Level 4, Frying. Level 8, Inch. I can't believe it has been leveling up all this time without even being operational, Gustav said while checking out his skills and abilities. Since he had tried to use it several times to no avail, he ignored it so he didn't notice that it had been leveling up like the rest. Gustav focused his eyes on the skills, waiting for information to pop up beneath them so he could check out the information on recreation. In 3 seconds, information appeared under every skill and ability explaining their usage. Gustav had seen the rest before, so his eyes traveled down the list to where recreation was positioned. What? Gustav's eyes widened in shock as he read the information beneath recreation internally. Chapter 50. Gustav focused his eyes on the skills, waiting for information to pop up beneath them so he could check out the information on recreation. In 3 seconds, information appeared under every skill and ability explaining their usage. Gustav had seen the rest before, so his eyes traveled down the list to where recreation was positioned. What? Gustav's eyes widened in shock as he read the information beneath recreation internally. Skills and abilities, dash, level 4, ability to increase current speed by 25 for 20 seconds, sprint, level 3, multiplies current speed by 2, regeneration, level 3, recover from injuries 20 times faster than normal, morph, level 3, bloodline ability, change hair color, skin tone and shift facial muscles, joint movement, level 3, bloodline ability, move joints in reverse, toxin immunity, level 3, protection against slightly lethal toxins, recreation, level 3, ability to combine bloodlines to create a fused bloodline that will generate a new ability entirely. Based on the compatibility of both bloodlines, the fused bloodline could range from C, a grade, bloodline acquisition, level 3, ability to extract bloodlines and pair them with host if the right requirements are met. C, F rank, Chop, level 6, using either a weapon or a sharp object, host can multiply the force of his strike by 3 times. Palm Strike, level 4, when a collision is made using this skill, it generates a force that infiltrates deep into the surface of collision. Gustav's eyes were focused on the recreation. He couldn't believe that such a skill existed all this time, and the system prevented him from using it. The possibilities of what he could achieve with this made him shiver from excitement internally. Oh wait, now that I think about it, I wouldn't be able to make use of this ability if I didn't have more than one bloodline. Gustav realized this and understood that even if the system gave him access, he wouldn't be able to use it. But now he could try it out since he currently has 3 bloodlines in total. But what would happen to the original bloodlines after I fused them? Would I still be able to use them singularly, or would they become one entity that I won't be able to use separately? Gustav thought hard about this. He had wanted to test it out, but when these thoughts popped up, he felt he should look into it properly before thinking of using the skill. I can't try this with Beast Transformation or any of the 3 I currently have. I will need to steal more bloodlines and perform experiments on those first, Gustav concluded, but now the issue was how he was going to steal more bloodlines. He couldn't steal bloodlines out in the open because he would have to make contact with the blood located in the neck area of a person before he could get the system notification for bloodline extraction. He would need to be in a secluded environment before he could think of doing that. Gustav started to hatch a plan in his mind. He had decided he was going to move his plans for revenge forward with this situation at hand. He didn't even notice that he could now steal C-grade bloodlines until a notification rang in his head. A new monthly quest has been issued. Gustav stared at the notification with a look of anticipation. Quest: acquire a C-grade bloodline in 30 days or less. Rewards: hidden. Punishment for failure: hidden. I need to acquire a C-graded bloodline. This was when Gustav's happened to notice on the system interface that he could now extract C-grade bloodline. Gustav couldn't help but smile at this since it came at a time when he was thinking of acquiring more bloodlines. He knew scheming would be necessary before he could get the opportunity to steal a bloodline without drawing any suspicions, yet he was glad because this meant he could finally steal bloodlines from some of the students who gave him trouble back in the past, since some of them were C-graded. Gustav brought his eyes down to the rewards and punishment section. What the heck? Everything is hidden? Gustav voiced out with a look of discomfort. This was the first time the system was hiding both the rewards and the punishment. The punishment was mostly hidden, but he had never seen both of them hidden at the same time when a quest was issued. Just what is it playing at? Gustav sighed internally in defeat. He just couldn't understand the system at times. On the bright side, the system had stopped calling him an idiot, but he still wondered why it didn't initiate a conversation with him like earlier, but Gustav knew that no matter how hard he thought of it, there was no point. It wasn't up to 3 months since he got the system, so he knew finding out the secrets it held would take a lot of time. Even though he occasionally had questioning thoughts about where the system came from and all that, he wasn't really bothered. He was just happy he encountered something like this, and right now his thoughts were still preoccupied with the present situations, so he had decided to place this at the back of his mind in the meantime. Gustav closed the system interface and tapped on the webboard in front of him. A holographic projection appeared in front of him after that. Time to continue my research, Gustav muttered. In a flash, 2 days had gone by. During these 2 days, Gustav's and Yuhiko's duel had been a hot topic in the dojo. Everyone on the third to the last floor heard about it also. The second floor only had 12 students that attended Echelon Academy, and they happened to be simping for Yuhiko in one way or the other, so they never mentioned the fight in school. It was said in school that she lost to in grade mixed blood instead of an F grade. The third floor of the dojo had lots of students from Echelon Academy there, but because they weren't there when the battle happened, they couldn't confirm that she was defeated by an F grade. In school, the matter of her losing to someone in the dojo quickly died down after the students heard it was in grade, but in the dojo, it was a very hot topic. They heard in school that the person's name was Gustav, but no one linked it to Gustav himself because they felt it wouldn't be possible. No one expected that Gustav, who was known as Trash, was the same person who had defeated her. Yuhiko didn't appear in the dojo since that day. She couldn't bear the humiliation. She was able to save her social life in the school, but in the dojo, it had been totally wrecked. Gustav wasn't even bothered by all the drama. He opened a bank account the previous day and kept his compensation money there. At present, it was Saturday in the afternoon and Gustav had been on the web since morning. He was currently seated on his reading chair, tapping onto a virtual holographic keyboard, bringing up the previous database. A robotic-like voice rang out as holographic projections started appearing around Gustav. Tryon. Multiple of them appeared in form of squares scattered around the place. On the projection were pictures of different kinds of beast-like looking animals. These animals bore a slight semblance to normal animals, but they were quite different when it came to body proportions and size. Not only that, but also, a lot of them had different shapes and a kind of fierce primitive look. A large muscular-looking bunny with gigantic fangs, a tortoise similar to the size of a truck, standing on 2 legs, a butterfly as large as a chopper, etc. Different images of bizarre-looking creatures were displayed. Mixed breeds are truly in varieties. These types would be out of my jurisdiction, Gustav muttered with a look of amazement. Chapter 51. He had been researching on mixed breeds since the night before. He still wondered how such creatures existed on Earth, and he was only coming across one after 16 years of his life. He had found out that the mixed breed he defeated was a level 2 mixed breed, which was comparable to a step 3 Zulu rank. Gustav had figured out that not all mixed breeds were the mindless type that attacked human civilizations. He also discovered that some mixed breeds were mixed bloods whose bloodlines went AWOL when awakening them, turning them into beasts. Some mixed breeds looked entirely different from any animal that used to exist on Earth, while others looked similar but quite monstrous. Wait, it's possible to exchange the bodies of mixed breeds for money? Gustav was currently staring at an article on the web that displayed this information. It read that the body of mixed breeds could be exchanged for money in laboratories. Laboratories made a lot of research in that aspect. Depending on the type of mixed breeds and their level, it could sell for good money. Gustav carried on with his research, glancing from projection to projection before a knock was heard on his door. Calm. Gustav stood up and went to check it out. To his surprise, it was Angie. She was clad in a short green gown. The gown had blue floral patterns, making her look especially cute. Her beautiful silver-colored pupils with a shade of pink added a kind of uniqueness to her looks, especially with the warm smile on her face. "Hello, Gustav." Angie waved immediately after Gustav opened the door. "Hey, do you need something?" Gustav asked immediately after noticing she was the one. He didn't want to waste time, so he could go back to his research. Well, my mom asked me to invite you to dinner, Angie said while using her right index finger to twirl her hair with an obvious shy expression. Dinner? Gustav had a look of confusion on his face before slamming the door on Angie while entering his apartment. Angie? She was confused as to why Gustav would suddenly slam the door shut in her face. I guess it's a no then, Angie muttered with a dejected expression while turning around to leave. Inside his apartment, Gustav checked the time and was surprised to find out that it was 9:30 p.m. at night already. Damn, I haven't completed today's task, Gustav exclaimed. He had lost himself in researching mixed breeds, so he didn't notice that it was already late in the night. He quickly picked up his red hoodie jacket and wore it before dashing out of his apartment. By the time he arrived at the corridor, Angie had gone back to her apartment, but Gustav didn't even take notice of this. His mind was currently preoccupied with completing today's task before the time ran out. He opened the system interface to check. Quests, daily today's task, 1/3. Travel 140 kilometers, status, 002/120 km. Climb to a height of 900 meters, status, 0/900 m. Carry a total of 2,750 kilograms, status, 0/2750 kg. He had been cooped up in his apartment all day, so he hadn't completed a single task. He analyzed the task and noticed that the only tasking one among them would be lifting the required amount of weight. He could easily lift this amount of weight, but the problem was getting a particular item that weighed enough to be counted by the system. Right now, the system only calculated the weight of items he carried in hundreds of kilograms. If the item wasn't up to 100 kilograms, the system wouldn't count it. In his apartment, there was not a single item that weighed up to 100 kilograms. Gustav only thought about it for a few seconds before he came up with an alternative. As for the traveling and climbing, he could easily get these two done. For traveling, he could board a hover bus to take him anywhere, while for the climbing, he could use the stairways repeatedly. Gustav dashed down the stairway and reached the bottom of the building in a few seconds. There were still people in the neighborhood, so Gustav decided to activate silent advancement along with dash to increase his speed and also make his ascent as silent as possible. Dash has been activated. Silent advancement has been activated. Swoosh. Gustav immediately dashed up the stairs once again. No tapping sounds were made when he ran up the stairs, even with that amount of speed. The small waves of wind he used to generate were now mild and almost completely silent. This was the first time Gustav was using silent advancement, but he was liking the ability. Not even a single person noticed him in the environment, and he bet he could sneak up on someone like this without their knowledge. He got to the top and descended once again before running back up. He repeated this severally before finally seeing a notification appear in his line of sight. Daily task completed, 1/3, climb to a height of 900 meters square root. Gustav descended again after seeing this notification. He used dash once and completed this in less than 20 seconds. Gustav didn't waste time before heading towards the nearest bus stop and boarding a hover bus. He calculated on the city map the closest place he could travel to for the traveling task to be completed. He decided to head towards a particular part of the city that was close to Echelon Academy, but still some miles away. In about 5 minutes, he received the notification for completing the traveling quest, but now he had gotten to the destination he picked, so he had to get down from the bus. If he wanted to head back, he would have to pick another. Immediately he got down from the bus, the familiar area appeared in his line of sight. The area between the residential and business class buildings. He walked a bit further ahead and noticed an uncompleted building in the distance. To be precise, there were 5 uncompleted buildings, but the one in the middle particularly stood out. Bolin Construction Site, 7. Gustav said inwardly as memories of that day began flooding into his mind again. He walked closer and closer to the place, staring at the building in the middle where his first bloodline stealing adventure began. He remembered almost dying at Paul's hand here. This was also the same place he decided to stop being a wimp and where he first took a person's life. That was something he never thought he would do. Help! A scream brought him back to reality. Chapter 52. Help! A scream brought him back to reality. Gustav turned around to see a teenage girl in red clothing running from an assailant in black. Both of them were coming from the route that led to the back of the construction site. The teenage girl was dressed in a tight-fitted red gown. She had makeup on her face, making it was obvious that she was dressed for an occasion. Gustav felt that she was probably just coming from a party or something. Both she and the assailant were faster than normal, so it was obvious that they were mixed bloods. Also, not many people were passing this area at this time. Gustav could only see about 3 people at different corners of the street. There was no telling if they were normal people or not, so they probably wouldn't be able to follow their speed if they were. The girl and the assailant were headed in Gustav's direction. He was the only one around here who actually had the chance to help her, unlike the others, but he had decided not to butt in. "Get back here, you bitch. Leave me alone, you horny bastard. When I catch you, I'll enjoy my time with you. I will never attend your party again. I will have my way with you, and nothing can stop me, ha ha ha." Their dialogue drifted into Gustav's ears as he kept walking. On closer look, the assailant was actually a teenage boy clad in black. From their conversation, Gustav had painted a kind of picture in his head about what happened. He figured the girl was probably invited to a party, and now she's about to be violated by one of the organizers. This unpopulated area was proof that this might truly be the case, since youngsters nowadays tended to like partying in places where they wouldn't be disturbed. Gustav also concluded that the boy was not scared of chasing her all the way out in the open because he probably wouldn't face the consequences of breaking the law. In other words, the boy must have a background that can exempt him. Another bastard that comes from an affluent family? Gustav was tempted to butt in after analyzing the situation, but he changed his mind. "It's none of my business. Let her suffer the consequences of attending such parties." Gustav kept walking forward. "Don't make me use it. I don't want to ruin that sexy body of yours. Help!" the female shouted out just as they were closing in on Gustav in front. "Bitch, you're still asking help from another person?" the boy shouted out while stretching his hand out. Foom! A black ball of gas shot out from his palm after performing that action. The girl screamed out and ducked. Due to that action, the ball of black gas was headed towards Gustav in front. Gustav stared at the ball of gas as it approached with an inquisitive look. He analyzed it as it approached him. The girl who ducked seemed to be shouting out something after ducking. She already thought Gustav would definitely get hit, but to her surprise, he swerved to the side quicker than she expected, dodging the ball of black gas. Bam! It made contact with a small sign that was 3 meters behind Gustav earlier. SSHHHSSS. A sizzling sound rang out as the sign started melting. The teenage boy was able to catch up to the girl after this. He grabbed her and lifted her from the ground with a smile on his face. "You gave me so much trouble. I will take my time with you," the boy said while licking her earlobes. The girl shivered in fright as the boy's left palm traveled towards her chest. He grabbed her breasts through her clothes and started fondling them. "Ah, what a great feeling," he muttered with a look of delight. Lutmego. She struggled to free herself, but he was obviously stronger than her. "Hey, you almost hit me." The boy paused his hands and stared at Gustav, who had just spoken ahead. His eyes traveled from top to bottom and from bottom to top before sneering. "Who is this rat? Watch where you're going next time then, idiot, haha." Gustav looked down and smiled when he heard that. "I really wanted to mind my business, but now..." Gustav started walking forward slowly as he spoke. When he was only 3 feet away from them, he looked up to stare into the eyes of the boy. "You just made it my business." Immediately Gustav muttered these words. He grew to the height of over 6 feet, and he stretched out his palm to grab the boy's hand. He held onto the hand the boy was using to fondle the girl's breasts and tightened his grip around it. Clench. Crack. Kyar. The boy screamed out as the bones in his wrist area were broken in two. He let go of the girl immediately that happened and fell to the ground, crying while holding onto his right arm. The girl fell to her, and stared at Gustav with an astonished look. Gustav raised his leg and swung it forward towards the boy's chest. Bam! The kick sent the boy flying back by 5 meters as his chest collapsed from the impact. SHHHSSHH. The boy still slid a few inches backward before his body came to a pause. The girl's eyes widened as she stared at the boy ahead. She turned her head around to stare at Gustav with a look of appreciation. "Thank you," the girl said while smiling at Gustav. "I didn't do it for you," Gustav said and activated dash before running forward. Swoosh. In a few seconds, he was out of sight. The girl still kept staring in that direction for a few seconds before she heard a cough. The boy was still on the floor coughing out blood. "Help me." The boy's voice cracked due to pain as he held his chest while speaking. "Oh, what a reversal." The girl walked towards him while speaking with a ridiculing tone. She stared at him with a gloating look for a few seconds before coming to a realization. "Oh, I should probably get out of here," she said in her mind and ran in the opposite direction. The boy was left there in his pool of blood. It was late in the night, so the probability of people seeing him in this particular area was not very high. He knew this since he picked the venue for the party himself. Gustav had arrived at the closest bus station after using dash twice. He didn't return to his normal size until he entered the bus. "I would have killed that idiot and taken his bloodline had we not been out in the open," Gustav said internally as he sat. He had come up with a plan at that moment to get the boy's bloodline, but he discarded it because he couldn't stay for long after attacking the boy. He has wanted to lure him into Bolin construction site and perform extraction there, but he changed his mind. There were cams on the streets, but not in the incomplete buildings, but if Gustav took him there was a chance he would get caught since he would take longer to extract the bloodline than to just beat him up and leave. This was also why he increased his size before hitting the boy. "Maybe next time," Gustav sighed as he concluded and rested his back on the seat. Hidden quest completed. Gustav sat straight as he saw that. Quest details. Save the girl from getting caught by the assailant. Gustav's expression was full of bewilderment as he stared at the notification. "I would have failed if I decided to ignore her?" Gustav wanted to curse the system, but he understood that it wouldn't be called Hidden Quest if he was told about it beforehand. He had practically failed since he didn't get involved until after the boy's attack nearly hit him. Reward: Bloodline Upgrade, 5000 EXP. Congratulations! Host morph ability has now evolved into Shapeshifting. Shapeshifting? Gustav's eyes widened as he stared at the notification. Chapter 53. A few minutes later, Gustav had arrived back in his neighborhood. Only one daily task was left for him to complete at the moment. The time was already 10 p.m., which meant he still had 2 hours before the day ended. Gustav sighed in relief. His plan for completing the last task required him to head towards the forest area. He activated dash again and ran towards the forest area. Swoosh! In a few seconds, his silhouette streaked past the last apartment in this residential area and headed for the sparse forest up ahead. When Dash ran out, he had arrived in front of a tree in the middle of the sparse forest region. The tree was about 9 meters tall with green and blue shades. The width of the tree was comparable to that of 4 people placed together. Gustav stood in front of the tree and stretched out his hand to touch it. "This one is good," he muttered after feeling the tree up with his palm. Gustav clenched his fist, drew his arm backward, and punched out. Bam! His fist collided with the tree, causing a loud blast to ring out. A 4 inches deep hole was formed within the tree and Gustav's fist was buried inside. Gustav pulled his arm out of the hole and placed his fingers on his chin. "With my normal strength, I can only do this much. Let me put my back into it," Gustav said internally as he got into a battle stance. "Phew!" He breathed out and arched his arm back to the limit before throwing out another fist. Bang! Crack! Upon collision, this time, Gustav's fist blasted a 10 inches deep hole into the body of the tree. Cracks spread from that point to the other parts of the tree, but it was still far from falling. "I guess this is as much as I can do with my normal strength." Gustav realized that his strength was still pretty low, and his win against the Bloodwolf came from combining his strength with that of beast transformation. He had no idea that his normal strength was rivaling third-step Zulu ranks. Partial mutated beast transformation. Gustav activated the beast transformation bloodline and started to grow in size. His body bloated and almost tore apart his sweater. If not for the elasticity of this one surpassing the former, it would have torn already. In this state, Gustav was over 8 feet tall. He clenched his fist again. "Let's try that again," he muttered with a deep voice. Bang! He punched the tree again, causing splinters to fly everywhere as his fist penetrated deep into the middle of the tree. The tree was still standing, but only slightly. Gustav dragged the right arm back while throwing out his left one. Bang! Crack! His left fist collided with the tree, and it finally gave way. The tree, which was standing proudly earlier, split apart from the bottom area. Crack! The wood at the stem area could no longer support its weight as it came crashing down. Bang! It slammed to the ground on Gustav's left. Gustav didn't transform back into his normal form. Instead, he walked towards the fallen tree. Since it had been broken down, it was now about 7 meters tall. Gustav crouched and placed his palm on the tree before gripping it. Ugh, he grunted while lifting the tree above his head. Just once was enough for him to hear the system notification ringing in his ear. Daily task completed. 3/3, carry a total of 2,750 kilograms. Gustav crouched down and dropped the tree gently. He slowly transformed back into human form. Just as he had expected, this tree weighed more than enough for him to complete his daily task. There were smaller trees in the area, but he decided to use them to make sure he completed the task in one go. Done. I need to start putting my daily tasks first before doing anything else for the day, Gustav said with a contemplative gaze. He has been researching mixed breeds since the night before. Since he could get EXP from killing mixed breeds and also selling their body parts, it would be a 2x win for him if he decided to start hunting them. The problem was where to look without getting himself killed, since there were mixed breeds that were more powerful than he was currently. Gustav sat down on the tree and opened the system interface. When it appeared in his line of sight, he called for Skills and Abilities panel to be displayed. Skills and Abilities, Dash, Level 4, Sprint, Level 3, Regeneration, Level 3, Shapeshifting, Level 1, Joint Movement, Level 3, Toxin Immunity, Level 3, Recreation, Level 3, Bloodline Acquisition, Level 3. Gustav's eyes were focused on shapeshifting. He wanted to know if it was what he thought it was. Shapeshifting, Level 1. Ability to copy the looks of a person when the right requirements are met. It's truly as I thought. Gustav felt like he was dreaming. He never knew he would get such an ability at a time like this. This makes everything much easier. Gustav was already thinking about how he was going to make use of the ability to the best of his benefit. He had never seen someone with a shape-shifting ability before, so he believed it must be pretty rare. Gustav decided to head back to his apartment after a few minutes of sketching plans. It was past 10 p.m. at the time when Gustav entered the building. He got to the last floor in a few seconds and walked through the corridor that led to his apartment. He noticed the silhouette of a person sitting in front of his apartment door. The lights in the corridor were dimly lit, which was why Gustav couldn't see this person properly, but due to perception he had already noticed the person from far away, and he could tell that this person was a female. Gustav walked silently towards the person with a suspicious expression on his face. He was preparing to attack or counter any form of attack if this person happened to be dangerous. He moved silently until he was only 7 feet away from the person. He could finally see the person clearly. "Angie?" he muttered with a bewildered expression as he walked towards her. Angie was seated in front of his apartment in such a way that her knees were hugging her chest. Her arms were placed in a crossed format on her knees, and her forehead was resting on her arms. Occasionally her head would tilt to the side and fall off her arms, only for her to subconsciously place them back on her arms. "Angie," Gustav got to her front and called out. "Flicker." Her eyelids trembled, and she opened her eyes, which were still heavy with sleep. "Huh," she muttered with a confused look as her eyes cleared up and she noticed Gustav standing in front of her. "Gustav, you're back." She jumped up with a look of embarrassment and cleaned the drool from the side of her mouth. "Yes, I'm back. What are you doing here?" Gustav asked with a confused look. Well, I noticed you weren't back since you left an hour ago, so I decided to wait in front of your apartment so I would be able to call the police or alert the neighborhood on time if you didn't show up, just in case you were in any form of danger." Angie had a look of relief as she said that. Gustav's eyes widened in shock. She did this to ensure my safety? He wanted to say something after hearing her explanation, but he couldn't find the right words. He just kept staring at her as the seconds counted. He felt a rush of indescribable emotion welling up from inside him as he noted the look of concern on her face. Angie was also staring back at him. The atmosphere was starting to turn awkward as both of them stared into each other's eyes. "It's good that you're back now," Angie finally spoke to break the silence. "I'm going to bed now. Good night." Angie turned around to head towards her apartment as she waved at Gustav. "Good night." Gustav's voice sounded croaked as he replied to her. She turned around and smiled at him warmly before entering her apartment. Gustav got his keys and opened his door before walking in. Pat. A drop of water fell to the floor a few centimeters ahead of Gustav, which brought his mind back to his surroundings. "Huh, what's this?" Gustav touched his cheek and felt wetness. "Am I crying?" Chapter 54. Huh, what's this? Gustav touched his cheek and felt wetness. "Am I crying?" He had a look of disbelief when he touched his cheek and realized that a line of tears was running down his left eye. "What is this about?" Gustav laughed lightly and cleaned his cheeks before walking towards his reading chair. He didn't want to think about the reason, even though he practically knew why. But he had made a new decision regarding Angie. The next morning, Gustav was up very early. He hadn't forgotten about how he decided his daily task would be his first activity, so he decided to do that when he woke up. It was still 5 a.m. at this time. Gustav was already used to being up this early, so it was a normal thing for him. He went out of his apartment to begin his daily task. Gustav used the same method as yesterday to finish the lifting and traveling task, but for the climbing task, he visited the dojo. Miss Amy had asked him to come there to assist her with something earlier on. It was a Sunday, but Gustav didn't attend a church because right from time, his parents were never churchgoers. A lot of people of this age weren't. In this age, people believed more in technology and alien life forms than a higher existence like gods. People have even claimed to be a higher existence themselves since the era of mixed blood started. Some Earthlings are seen as God themselves in this age. Angie's family was one of the people who still believed in the Christian God, so they went to church while Gustav went to the dojo after finishing his daily tasks. Around past 10 in the morning, Gustav was done in the dojo and was climbing down the stairs to the lower floors where he could get an elevator. On the third to the last floor, he ran into someone, or to be precise, some people. This third floor to the last floor was the first floor of the dojo, and also the cheapest. It was the cheapest, but a lot of people couldn't afford it except for high-class families. Gustav happened to bump into his mother and brother when he got to the first floor of the dojo. They were coming from the elevator stand with a man in a black suit following them. They seemed to be immersed in a conversation as his mom could be seen laughing and smiling, while the man kept tapping his junior brother's shoulder with a look of admiration. They paused when they noticed Gustav coming from the other end. "Gustav?" The mother's eyes widened upon seeing him here. Her mind went back to the last time they met, causing her to freeze. The man wondered why they stopped moving at first, but once he heard the name, his face shone with understanding. Indrik stared at Gustav with contempt. He was practically snarling like an angry animal upon seeing his face. Gustav didn't even bother sparing them another glance after taking a look at them once. He continued on his way after that and kept moving towards the elevator. As he got to their position and was about to pass by their side, a large palm grabbed onto his shoulder. Gustav paused his footsteps and stared at his left shoulder to see the man in a black suit gripping his shoulder tightly. "Young man, you lack courtesy." The man spoke with a deep voice. Gustav's sight traveled from the hand of the man up to his face. The man had slightly tanned skin with thick beards and a mustache. His build was gigantic, making him look similar to a gorilla. Every part of him was bulky, including his large palms grabbing onto Gustav's shoulder. Gustav could feel more than 1,000 pounds of weight resting on his shoulder. "What do you mean by that?" Gustav said while trying to free his shoulder from this man's grasp. "You didn't even pay respects to your mother, neither did you apologize to your brother for beating him up. What kind of kid are you?" The man brought his face down closer to Gustav's face as he spoke. "The kind that doesn't have a mother or brother. I will not apologize to dead people," Gustav said while brazenly pushing the man's hand off his shoulder. "You." Indrik pointed at Gustav with an angered expression. Their mother stared at Gustav like she was seeing another person. "Oh, you have the guts to talk back to an Echo-ranked MBO colonel? What a brave young lad." The man spoke with a threatening tone as he placed his palm back on Gustav's shoulder. This time he clenched Gustav's shoulder even harder than before, to the extent that Gustav's shoulder blade was starting to make bone-creaking sounds. What does that have to do with anything? I told you I don't apologize to the dead. Gustav stood his ground even though he was starting to feel pain in his shoulder. You will apologize, and you will do so while kneeling. The man voiced out again while increasing the force on Gustav's shoulder. He intended to make him kneel. Gustav gritted his teeth as his knees begun to give way. The people in the environment that wanted to interfere earlier scattered like rats upon hearing that the man was an echo-ranked mixed blood from the MBO. Gustav could tell that the man was only using a low portion of his strength, yet he could barely fight against it. The man smiled as he clamped on Gustav's shoulder tighter, pressing him down even more. Gustav grabbed onto the man's hand with both his palms and pushed up with as much strength as he could muster, but it was still of no use. His legs were trembling due to the intense weight and slowly bending towards the ground. Indrik watched from the side with a crazed smile. Yes, Master JK, make him pay for touching me. This man happened to be Indrik's tutor from the MBO, and he was referred to as JK, IYLLNOT. Gustav's face was extremely fierce at this moment. His muscles had bulged intensely, and his legs had caused slight cracks on the ground due to his pushing up. Still, everything was futile as his knees kept bending and bending. His knees were only a few centimeters from the ground at this point, but he still wasn't ready to give in. Oh, wasn't this lad supposed to be weak? Even Indrik cannot handle this. How is he able to resist with an F-grade bloodline? Master JK wondered. Although he was only using a small portion of his strength, just like Gustav thought earlier, this amount of strength was powerful enough to bring any Zulu-ranked mixed blood to their knees. Gustav was unwilling to be humiliated once again. He had faced enough of that in the past, especially for things that made no sense like what was going on right now. No one in their normal senses would meddle with a family feud, but this man seemed to be hell-bent on humiliating Gustav here today. That look of unwillingness on your face makes me want to humiliate you even more. How dare you touch my student? Master JK increased the force and pushed down on Gustav's shoulder even more. Just when Gustav's knees were about to make contact with the floor, a loud feminine voice was heard. What do you think you're doing to my student, JK? Chapter 55. What are you doing to my student, JK? The feminine voice was laced with such sharpness that it caused the man to tremble slightly upon hearing it. This voice, no way, it can't be her? Master JK's shoulders turned stiff as he slowly turned around to stare at the person that had just spoken. Immediately he saw her. His heart nearly jumped out of his chest. It was a young lady with gray long hair. She had a slim and beautiful figure with a height that was almost 57. She was clad in a green short tight-fitted gown with a brown coat draped around her shoulders. Young Miss Amy. The man looked very surprised to see her. Miss Amy strode towards them with light and graceful steps. In 2 seconds she was already standing before them. I said, what are you doing to my student? Miss Amy asked with a threatening tone. Yo, you are, student? Master JK turned back to look at Gustav, who was staring at him with a fierce look. Miss Amy also followed his look and noticed Gustav's shoulder was out of place. It seemed quite curved at an angle that suggested that it was broken. Her eyes suddenly turned fierce. How dare you? Swing. Miss Amy suddenly swung out her left hand towards the face of Master J.K. Pa. The sound of collision was like a miniature thunderclap, causing small vibrations in the air. 20 pieces of teeth flew out of Master J.K.'s mouth along with a trail of blood as he was sent flying several feet toward the side. He kept sliding for several more feet till his head slammed into the wall. Bang! Everyone within the vicinity had their mouths wide open except for those who already knew Miss Amy beforehand. Did she just blow an echo-ranked mixed blood from the MBO away with one slap? Everyone had thoughts similar to this in their minds. Indrik and his mother were particularly surprised the most as the looks on their faces suggested that. Who is this woman? Why did she say she's Gustav's teacher? Indrik was not familiar with Miss Amy since he was still in middle school, while their mother never attended the parent-teachers meeting whenever there was one in high school, so she never knew any one of Gustav's teachers. Both of them couldn't recognize her. "Are you all right?" Miss Amy turned to stare at Gustav while asking. Gustav nodded in affirmation. Although his shoulder was slightly injured from the intense grip, it had healed back due to his regeneration ability. "JK," Miss Amy called out again. JK was still lying on the floor while spitting out more pieces of his broken teeth and blood. When he heard Miss Amy call out to him again, he crawled towards her with a terror-stricken face. "Youing I am so RRY." Master JK held Miss Amy's feet while begging. Everyone here couldn't understand the reason for such extreme behavior after the pride he had shown earlier. They had different theories popping into their heads upon seeing an officer from the MBO kneel to a citizen. It was an unbelievable sight, but they also knew that Miss Amy couldn't be an ordinary person for this kind of thing to be happening. Miss Amy glared at Master JK below with a dark look. Master JK shivered in his position as he saw her slightly crouch and stare into his eyes with more intensity. "Tap, tap." She slapped the back of his head lightly twice and spoke. "I'm not the one you should be apologizing to." Master JK heard that and turned to stare at Gustav before turning his head back to stare at Miss Amy again. He knew that if he complied with her demand, it would result in humiliation for him, but if he didn't, only he knew the horrors that awaited. Is he going to do it? Everyone had a feeling that they were going to witness something they had never seen before in their lives. Master JK swallowed spit and let go of Miss Amy's feet before crawling towards Gustav. "I am so RRY," he said with a pleading look. Gustav could see the fear written all over Master JK's face, which had him wondering, why would he fear Miss Amy so much? It was surprising to see this much fear on a person's face, but even with Gustav felt like laughing when he saw Master JK's mouth missing nearly all of its teeth. "Well, since we've already gotten to this point," Gustav raised his foot and brought it down on Master JK's face. Blam! Gasp! Everyone stared at the scene with a look of shock. They couldn't believe that Gustav would have the guts to do that. Gustav rubbed the sole of his shoes on Master JK's face repeatedly before bringing it down. "Now we're even," Gustav said inwardly and proceeded to move forward. "I'm going, Miss Amy." Gustav waved his hand towards Miss Amy and walked towards the elevator. Everyone stared at Gustav with a look of amazement. At this moment, he shined like a million stars in the galaxy, which attracted their eyes. Miss Amy nodded at him with a smirk on her face. "Good kid. You didn't wimp out on me," Miss Amy said and proceeded to turn around. She only moved 2 steps forward before pausing and turning around to stare at Indrik and his mother. "Thank you for letting go of such a wonderful son. I will make sure I take care of him, unlike you." She stated this and turned around to leave. Gustav's mother had a lifeless look on her face, mixed with confusion. She was unable to reply to that statement since everything still looked like a dream to her. Indrik's eyes were still widened as he couldn't believe what had happened. Neither did he understand what came over Gustav and where he got the boldness to go through with something as crazy as that. Master JK had a look of humiliation on his face as he remained in that position for many seconds. When Gustav stomped his face earlier, he didn't feel any pain since Gustav was too weak, but the humiliation he already felt was multiplied by 2. He had to watch someone weaker and lower than him in status stomp on his face without being able to fight back. He had never felt so humiliated before in his entire existence. Who knew that she would take in a disciple? "I need to stay away from here from now on," Master JK said internally as he gnashed his gums together, causing him pains. He had forgotten that at the moment he almost didn't have teeth. Gustav arrived in front of his apartment building in a few minutes. He walked into the building feeling refreshed and vibrant with his face glowing up. He thanked his stars that Miss Amy was there. If not, it would have to face another round of humiliation. He would probably be able to take it normally, but when it was in front of the family he discarded, he wasn't willing to accept it. He walked through the corridor and arrived in front of his apartment. Instead of heading towards his apartment, Gustav turned and headed for Angie's apartment. Calm, calm. He knocked twice. Swai. The door opened up and Angie's face appeared in his line of sight. "Hey, Angie," Gustav greeted with a smile on his face. "Hey, Gus dash," Angie was about to reply when she noticed something. "He's smiling?" Her eyes slightly widened in bewilderment. So charming. Seeing Gustav's lips curved at both edges looked so angelic to her that she didn't notice. They were still standing at the door. Is there something on my face? Gustav asked after noticing Angie's stare. So RRY. Your face is good, Angie replied with a wry smile. Too good. Her cheeks slightly reddened. I'm here to see your father. Is he in? Gustav said. My father? Yes, he's in, Angie said, and walked into the apartment. Come in, Gustav. A masculine voice sounded from within the apartment. Chapter 56. I'm here to see your father. Is he in? Gustav said. My father? Yes, he's in, Angie said, and walked into the apartment. Come in, Gustav. A masculine voice sounded from within the apartment. Gustav followed Angie in after hearing that. Angie's father was seated on the blue sofa located on Gustav's right side. Gustav walked towards the one opposite his and sat. This was the first time Gustav was seeing Angie's father during the day. He had only seen him during night times since he always came late from work and Gustav hardly came out of his apartment. On closer look, Gustav noticed that Angie's father's skin was whitish than normal and lines were extending from the horn in the middle of his head towards his nose and down to his lips. I guess he's one of those pure-blood Slarkovs with more physical differences to that of humans. Gustav noted this. Yes, Gustav, to what do I owe this visit? Angie's father said with a solemn face. Angie stood at the dining area side to listen to their conversation. She was also wondering why Gustav will come to see her father. I've decided to accept the offer for that position, Gustav replied. Angie's father's eyes widened slightly in delight. You mean, you will accept to do it? He asked. Gustav nodded in affirmation. Do what? What are Gustav and my father planning? Angie's mind was full of questions. Can we negotiate the price now, or we have to put some other procedures in place first? Gustav inquired. Let me inform the others first. Angie's father stood up and walked towards the passageway on the left. Angie stared at Gustav's face from the dining area with a suspicious look. Gustav just kept staring forward like he was thinking about something. There was no other expression on his face. I should mind my business so I don't end up like the last time, Angie said internally after remembering the stairs incident. She was still embarrassed about it till now. Angie kept staring at Gustav's face from the side. Her curiosity rose as the seconds passed, especially when her father still hadn't come back to the living room. After some more seconds passed, she walked towards Gustav. Gustav, what are you and my father planning? Angie asked while twirling her hair. Nothing special, Gustav replied with a dismissive look. Tell me, she demanded. Why are you interested? Gustav questioned while squinting his eyes. Well? Angie kept using her fingers to twirl her hair with a look of embarrassment. Gustav were heading to Darj coffee shop. Angie's father's voice came from the other end, cutting their conversation short. Gustav stood up and turned ahead towards the door. By Angie, Gustav said while heading towards the door. But... Angie stuttered as she spoke, trying to tell Gustav to wait, but Gustav didn't look back after getting to the door. He opened the door and walked out. Angie's father also followed behind him. Angie, tell your mother that I will be out for some time, Angie's father said as he walked out. Angie pouted her lips in dissatisfaction and sat on the sofa. What are they planning? Angie wondered. Inside a small coffee shop, a group of 6 could be seen seated around a table. Angie's father and Gustav were among the 6, while the rest happened to be men from the neighborhood. These men happened to live around the same neighborhood as Gustav and Angie's family. Their apartments were located close to the sparse forest area behind them. We saw what he did the other day, so we're very confident that he can play this role. It should be a simple task for him. The safety of the community is paramount. The men spoke with a look of agreement. From what I heard, you're a Zulu-ranked mixed blood. One of the men sitting opposite Gustav asked. Gustav nodded in response. Being a Zulu-ranked mixed blood at such a young age, truly magnificent. Another man added. So we all agree on Gustav being the next observer, Angie's father said with a solemn look. The 4 men nodded in affirmation. That settles it then. Gustav is our community observer from henceforth, Angie's father said with a smile. Can we talk about the price now? Gustav inquired with an expressionless look. The men nodded in response, and another round of conversation began. Some hours later, Gustav had arrived back in his home. He sat on the bed while planning his next move. If this goes as planned, I should be able to gather enough EXP to start leveling up without having to wait for quests, Gustav muttered. Although they don't appear every time, I remember Angie saying they've been appearing every week for a while now, which means at least another will be appearing this week. Gustav had a look of contemplation on his face as he spoke. His mind traveled back to today's events. In the dojo, Miss Amy had given him some information on MBO and mixed breeds. He also happened to bump into his former family. While the best of today's event was getting a new job, the other day when the neighborhood was attacked by the Blood Wolf, Angie told Gustav that they used to have a neighborhood observer that happened to be a Step 4 Zulu-ranked mixed blood. He was called Old Man Daki. His work was generally a simple one: to patrol the neighborhood till midnight for any source of disturbance that had to do with mixed breeds. Mixed breeds occasionally appeared within the neighborhood at night time, but he had managed to fend off and sometimes even kill a lot of them. He was able to protect the neighborhood from mixed breeds below the serial rank. There was hardly any case of mixed breeds above level 5 appearing in the neighborhood. Once a mixed breed that had surpassed level 5 appeared in the neighborhood, the MBO will immediately be alerted and swing into action with speed. Level 1, 5 mixed breed could be handled by Old Man Daki since he was a Step 4 Zulu-ranked mixed blood. Unfortunately, Old Man Daki passed away 3 weeks earlier at the age of 149. Chapter 57. Since then the neighborhood was exposed to danger. None of the mixed bloods in this neighborhood were Zulu-ranked. There was only one person who was Zulu-ranked, but that person wasn't a combat-type mixed blood. The neighborhood had occasional attacks of lower-leveled mixed breeds like once every month, but before Old Man Daki died the creatures started appearing every week. He was able to manage the situation before it went completely out of hand, but when he died it became a shitstorm for the neighborhood. There were about 57 buildings in that particular area where Old Man Daki protected. With Old Man Daki gone, a mixed breed managed to infiltrate a building and slaughtered an entire family. Angie was the only one that could stand up to the mixed breeds, but she could only drag out the fight till the cops arrived and killed it off with modern weapons. Now that Gustav had arrived in the neighborhood and they saw how he was capable of killing a mixed breed, they decided to make him an observer. They thought he was a Step 4 Zulu ranked like Old Man Daki. Gustav didn't bother explaining to them that he wasn't. He let them believe they were right. Of course, they knew Gustav still attended school, so patrolling all night would be impossible, but the job didn't require Gustav to patrol the neighborhood all night. He only had to do it till midnight. According to the 25-year history of this place, mixed breeds never appeared around midnight. The closest to midnight they had appeared was around 11 p.m. If Gustav patrolled till 12 and no irregularities were noticed, he would be done with the job for that night. Gustav and the men in the coffee shop had a lengthy conversation about this. These men were well-known figures in the community, so they were practically representing the neighborhood with their choices. Gustav charged them 30,000 a month. Old Man Daki used to collect 15,000 every month, but Gustav felt it was too low. Although his goal for doing this wasn't completely because of the money, he wouldn't do it for such a price, talkless of doing it for free. The men had no option but to accept Gustav's price since he wasn't backing down. Gustav walked out of his apartment towards the balcony area. He moved towards the edge where he could see the buildings and the surroundings. Some buildings were taller than this in the vicinity, but they were only a few. Most of the buildings around here were no more than 10 stories tall. He looked around, noting the structures and streets. From now on, this neighborhood is under my protection, I guess. Gustav smirked while saying this internally. He started his new job this same night. Gustav used that night time to know the neighborhood better. He had every single building color, structure, location etched into his head. The alleyways, streets, intersections, etc. He had memorized every part of the neighborhood. He also patrolled deeper into the sparse forest area behind. He discovered that the forest of trees wasn't sparse the further he traveled. The deeper he traveled into the forest, the denser the forest of trees became. Gustav had discovered something yesterday, and he wanted to confirm it. When he got to a particular depth, He could see blue and green glowing lines forming a wall up ahead. The blue and green glowing lines were more than 1,000 meters from his position, yet he could see them. The wall they formed was more than 600 feet in height. He immediately figured that this was the border they were referring to. The second border, since according to his research there were two borders. One blocked the mixed breed within the city from entering into human territories, while the second, which was still up ahead, served as the division between Plankton City and Atrahea City. The distance between the two borders was said to be about 3,000 miles. This made Gustav wonder just how many mixed breeds were in between for there to be that much space. There was a long road towards his east that led to the outskirts of the city. The blue and green glowing lines barricaded the road on both sides, which proved that the road was safe to travel on since it cut through the middle of the forest ahead. This road was well constructed, and it also led to the city behind. If a person was to find themselves within the second border, they would be traversing through the territory of mixed breeds. Gustav didn't move close to the glowing lines to check them out because from his position, he could sense immense danger coming from those lines. He decided to turn back after observing the border for a few more minutes. The rest of the night was uneventful, and by midnight, he headed back to his apartment to have a good night's rest. 3 days later, nothing interesting had happened during the last 3 days. Gustav had been doing his job as expected, but nothing had happened recently. He still researched about the borders in his free time and had learned more about them in these past 3 days. Gustav was now interested in traveling through the second border after everything he discovered. The only issue was he couldn't leave the city right now. He wasn't chanced due to all his activities. The next morning, Gustav was up again around 5 a.m. as usual. Today was a Thursday, which made it another school day. Gustav wasted no time in getting ready for school, and in about 10 minutes he was done. When he came out of his apartment, Angie was at the door waiting for him. He wondered why she would decide to go to school this early, just so she could follow him, but he couldn't find the answer. He just felt she was pretty weird. They headed for school together and went their separate ways after taking a bus to the nearest stop to both their schools. Gustav headed for his favorite kitchen to go do his morning job. Today was a pretty boring day in school again. Gustav was starting to get bored with schoolwork. He couldn't wait for the MBO entrance test to take place, but that was still 3 months away. Miss Amy told him not to slack in channeling his bloodline because Zulu rank may be the threshold for taking part in the test, but that didn't mean only Zulu-ranked mixed bloods would be participating. When Gustav heard that, he suddenly felt a rush of excitement. He had been focusing more on the system than channeling his bloodline because he didn't want to become way stronger than the participants of the test. He didn't want to arouse intense suspicion, so he was channeling his bloodline slowly, especially after he found out that with every increase in rank came about a substantial multiplication of strength. He wanted to get enlisted into the MBO camp before he would go full force on increasing his bloodline strength and coupling it with the system altogether. Now that Miss Amy had said this, he decided to reach the next rank before the entrance test took place. The serial rank. School ended today with exciting announcements. There will be a 3-day exchange event between high schools holding in Atrahea City High School 1 month from now. Echelon Academy has been invited to participate. Class 3 students will be attending this exchange event. The principal of the school sounded this announcement in the ears of the students within the school hall. Gustav, who was seated far behind, had a smile on his face as he heard the announcement. Just the chance I have been waiting for to cross the border. Chapter 58. There will be a 3-day exchange event between high schools holding in Atrahea City High School 1 month from now. Echelon Academy has been invited to participate. Class 3 students will be attending this exchange event. The principal of the school sounded this announcement in the ears of the students within the school hall. Gustav, who was seated far behind, had a smile on his face as he heard the announcement. Just the chance I have been waiting for to cross the border. After the announcements, students from Class 3 went home with faces full of excitement. Exchange events were always exciting. Traveling to another city and also getting to meet students from other schools. Another reason why it was exciting was that there were always duels between schools. Students in Class 3 were prepared to show their prowess over there, especially those who had already achieved the Zulu rank. These were the reasons why most of them were feeling excited, but Gustav's reason was different. He just wanted to cross the border for research purposes. He didn't even plan on getting involved in the events. He only tagged it as a sightseeing event. He wasn't interested in their duels. Gustav went to Miss Amy's office afterward, and they traveled towards the dojo. Blam, blam, blam. Inside the small dojo, sounds of collision could be heard. Gustav and Miss Amy were sparring once again. Blam, blam. Gustav spun around and threw his left foot towards Miss Amy's face. Miss Amy reacted by slapping Gustav's left leg towards the side, causing his body to tilt in midair. And now you're wide open again, Miss Amy voiced out. Gustav's chest was facing her at this moment while in midair. Miss Amy threw out her palm towards Gustav's tummy area. Gustav, who was in midair, suddenly rotated his body anti-clockwise at a very fast speed, causing her palm to miss him by a centimeter. This kid. Miss Amy was astonished as her hand only phased through the air after extending it forward. While still being in midair, Gustav reached out his palm to grab Miss Amy's outstretched arm. This kid's agility increases by the day. How is he improving so fast? Miss Amy wondered while staring at Gustav's hand headed for her arm. Grab. Gustav landed on his feet in a crouched format with his right hand stretched up. He smiled as he stood up properly. Miss Amy, I finally touched. Gustav's eyes widened in surprise as he noticed something after staring at his hand. In his grip was a prosthetic arm while he noticed that his wrist was gripped by Miss Amy. He thought he grabbed Miss Amy, but it was the other way around. Miss Amy, no fair, you used more strength than you were supposed to. Gustav voiced out as Miss Amy let go of his arm. Haha, what were you expecting? The world isn't fair, and you of all people should know that, Miss Amy stated with a burst of light laughter. What a shameless way of justifying cheating, Gustav muttered. Did you say something? Miss Amy smirked at him as she asked. Nope, I was just praising Miss Amy's exclusive methods, Gustav said with a smile. Gustav understood what she meant. On the battlefield, no one would reduce their strength to fight you just because you happen to be weaker. Gustav stared at the prosthetic arm he was holding with a look of astonishment. It seems Miss Amy can use her bloodline to create anything instantly, Gustav said internally. He was very close to touching her arm earlier, yet she was able to create a prosthetic arm instantly. Her speed was enough to fool him, making him think he had grabbed her. The prosthetic arm was exactly like hers. Gustav had touched Miss Amy severally during their sparring sessions, so he could close his eyes and still be able to recognize her arm if he touched it, yet he didn't notice that he wasn't holding her arm till he saw it with his eyes. Troyan. The arm dispersed into light particles while Gustav was still holding onto it. Gustav realized that this was the first time Miss Amy was using her bloodline ability in a spar against him. He analyzed the difference between Miss Amy's bloodline and Yuhiko's bloodline and noted the difference. Both were creation bloodlines, but Miss Amy's was the type that could materialize things out of thin air. She only needed a thought to create something. As for Yuhiko, she could only transform one thing into another. Yuhiko's creation bloodline allowed her to turn matter into anything she willed, but she still had limits. Also, she wasn't able to transform an item in an instant. If she wanted to convert the air around her into something else, it would take more time. The bigger the object she had in hand, the faster and better she could convert the item. Miss Amy didn't have that limitation, but she also couldn't convert an item into something else. So their bloodlines were similar, but also different. If any one of them could read Gustav's mind, they would find his analysis very scary because it was true. Gustav noted everything about their bloodline abilities, down to the details in his mind. He had been analyzing Yuhiko's years back since she was his crush. As for Miss Amy, he only analyzed hers at this moment. Now he only needed to see a person use their bloodline ability once for him to be able to analyze it. Gustav, what will you do in the exchange event? Miss Amy leaned with her back against the wall as she inquired. Nothing. I'm only coming along with them to sightsee, Gustav answered. So, you won't be joining your classmates to form a team in the Duoligan schools? Miss Amy inquired with a playful smile. Miss Amy knows me well enough to understand that I prefer to be alone than to work with those spoilt brats, Gustav answered while seating on the floor. Oh, Wouldn't it be boring for you to just go there and do nothing? Miss Amy asked with a smirk because she believed Gustav could not attend this event without getting into some kind of trouble. I'd rather be bored than associate with stupidity, Gustav replied. Oh, is that so? Miss Amy still had that mischievous smile on her face as she questioned. Seeing the smile on her face, Gustav already knew that Miss Amy had something in mind. Miss Amy wasn't the smiling type. She only ever did this around Gustav. Yes, I'm 100% sure that I won't participate in this event in any way, Gustav answered. I doubt that, Miss Amy answered. Gustav stared at her with a look of seriousness. Since you like bets so much, let's make a bet, Miss Amy suggested. Gustav's face shone confusion as he exclaimed. Some hours later, Gustav had arrived in front of his apartment building. His mind was on today's announcement in school. The exchange even was 1 month from now. The only problem Gustav had now was, how would he make it work since he already started this night job? Chapter 59. While walking towards his apartment, everyone around stared at him with a look of amazement. Welcome back, Gustav. Good afternoon, Gustav. How was school today? Different people greeted him from different angles. Some teenage girls around also greeted him with smiles. One of them was even winking at him. Gustav just nodded his head in response to their greetings and climbed the stairs to head towards his apartment. He got to the corridor and met Angie standing in front of his apartment door again. This time she was clothed in jeans shorts and a butter-colored sweater. Immediately she saw Gustav, she ran towards him. Gustav, why didn't you tell me that you were the new observer for our neighborhood? She questioned Gustav immediately she got to his front. Well, you didn't need to know that information, Gustav replied with a dismissive look and kept walking forward. He now understood the reason for the warm welcome in front of the building. Although he was always greeted warmly whenever he arrived, today's welcome was much warmer. It was obvious that the neighborhood was now aware of him being the new observer. Angie followed him from the side, waiting for him to say more, but to her disappointment, those were the only words he muttered. It's dangerous, Angie stated while looking down. What if you get killed? She asked with a crestfallen look. Gustav didn't reply. He just kept walking until he got to the front of his apartment. Gustav, I want in. Let me join you, she said while grabbing Gustav's cloth from behind. Immediately Gustav heard that he knew what she was referring to. No, Gustav replied while opening the door and walking in. But I can assist you. What if you get in trouble? I swear I don't plan on taking any cuts from your pay, Angie spoke with a look of worry. The answer is no, Gustav said with a fierce look, and was about to close the door when Angie said something. I'm now a Zulu-ranked mixed blood. Gustav held the side of the door and stared at her for a few seconds before replying. Congratulations, bye. Bye? Slam. Gustav slammed the door after congratulating her. Angie pouted her lips after the door was slammed in her face for the second time. So mean. She hugged her chest after muttering those words. Inside his apartment, Gustav had a frown on his face. She's definitely going to come and bother me again, he muttered with a sigh. Gustav understood Angie's character, and he knew she wouldn't want to back down, but he also couldn't back down on this since he had to keep his abilities a secret. Angie was overcaring, and it made Gustav get pissed off sometimes, but other times he saw her as an untainted soul. He didn't want to be disturbed by her persistence again, so he thought of a way to avoid her. No matter how nice Angie was, he would never risk letting her find out about his multiple bloodlines and abilities. Gustav walked towards his room and sat on his bed. No need to hold back with my bloodline. I cannot risk failing the entrance tests, Gustav said internally and proceeded to cross his legs. He closed his eyes and steadied his breathing. His concentration peaked as he sensed where his bloodline channel points were located in his body. This was when Gustav also noticed the other two bloodlines within his body, Atomic Manipulation and Beast Transformation bloodline. Gustav noticed that the channel points of these two bloodlines within his body were already channeled through the third point like his original bloodline earlier. The difference was, the channel points of both bloodlines weren't as large as his original bloodline. Gustav already understood that he would also have to channel the other two bloodlines to the fourth point to get them to the Zulu rank. This had him wondering, if all the bloodlines got to the Zulu rank, what changes would it bring? Gustav originally wanted to focus on his original bloodline, so he would become a second-step Zulu rank soon, but at this moment he changed his mind. He could tell that becoming a 3-time Zulu rank would bring some good benefits. So right now, Gustav decided to focus on channeling beast transformation to the 4th point. 3 hours later, it was already 7 p.m. It was time for Gustav to begin his night job. He had managed to channel beast transformation bloodline further. Even though he didn't get it to the 4th point yet, he was still all right with the progress. Gustav stood up from his bed and pulled off his school uniform. There was a mirror positioned on the left side of the wall. Gustav walked over to it and stood in front of it. He was surprised to see just how much he had transformed in 3 months. He was 54 in height right now. His face had become so smooth and his eyes were dim but fierce, giving him a very charming and vibrant look. His pupils had a shade of gold mixed with brown. His chin was long and slanted on both sides, looking like a V. Whenever Gustav went out, people always mistook him for the son of a billionaire due to his unique looks and fierce expression. None of them knew he was very far from being a billionaire's son. Gustav walked towards his wardrobe and picked up black jeans pants and a black sweatshirt. His former closet used to be empty, but this one was full of clothes. In no time, Gustav had worn his clothes and was ready to leave. His reason for being on all black was to blend into the environment. Although the streets were always brightly lit even during the nights, the same couldn't be said for the forest area behind the neighborhood. Gustav moved towards the right side of the room and tapped the surface of the wall thrice. Tap, tap, tap. A small part of the wall slid upwards, revealing the view of the streets and the structures on this side of the building. This opening was actually a window that had been there since Gustav rented the place, but he only found out about it 2 days ago. The window was as wide as a door, placed in a landscape format. Gustav placed his right hand on the edge of the window and looked downwards. Luckily, this part of the street was not usually populated. He could hardly see people moving around down there. Gustav leaned his body weight on his hand and lifted his body to perch on the window. Whoa! The winds blew into his face and caused the strands of hair in front of his head to jump around. A normal person would be scared seeing the distance from here to the ground, but Gustav was no longer a normal person. Sway! Gustav jumped forward and his body started descending with speed towards the ground. Thwom! Blam! In a few seconds, he landed on the ground, causing a small thudding sound to ring out. Unlike before when he jumped off this building and made a loud sound, this time there was hardly any sound. Dash has been activated. Gustav activated Dash and speed off towards the sparse forest behind the neighborhood. Swoosh! He had breezed through the street in a few seconds, causing mild winds to scatter across the place. Just as Gustav had predicted, a certain teenage girl was waiting outside his apartment. She stood in front of his door and repeatedly checked the watch in her hand. Why is he taking so long? Chapter 60. Gustav arrived in the sparse forest region in a few seconds. He stopped running after using Dash twice. He stood in front of a 312 meters tall tree. He crouched his knees a little and pushed himself upwards with force. Tum! He leaped 5 meters above the ground and grabbed onto the tree when he got to that height. His fingers sunk a few inches deep into the bark of the tree as he began climbing up. After avoiding the branches and leaves, Gustav arrived at the top of the tree. He stood on one of the branches and stared at the vast land around him. His perception had increased to the extent that he could sense movements from 40 meters away. His perception was able to cover around 40 to 45 meters radius. It was so sharp that even the movement of an ant couldn't escape his senses if he concentrated to the max. This was Gustav's routine for the past 3 days. He moved from place to place and climbed up the trees while spreading out his perception. He would also go back to the neighborhood areas to observe a particular area for the night before heading towards the sparse forest area again. His energy had increased now compared to before, so he could use Dash repeatedly and still save up a lot of energy. After checking around for some time and not noticing anything, Gustav jumped down from the tree. Blam! Immediately he landed, he activated Dash again and moved to another part of the sparse forest. In an underground facility, Laboratory pieces of equipment could be seen all over the place. Androids moved about the place, transporting pieces of equipment from one place to the other. People in white garments could be seen all over the place. A strong stench of chemicals permeated the environment. A man in a blue office suit stood in front of a glass wall. He had dark brown hair that was smoothly packed towards the back. His expression was stiff and cold. Unlike Miss Amy, who had a nonchalant expression, and Gustav, who was cultivating something similar, this man was more of the uncaring type. The look in his eyes was so cold and uncaring. He looked like the kind of person that wouldn't flinch, even if the entire world was burning. The transparent glass wall in front barricaded an experimentation testing room that was similar to the size of a basketball court. Inside the glass wall, an experiment was about to begin. A large greenish-looking rock was placed inside the room within the glass wall. This rock was about the size of a normal door, but wider than 3 meters. A large muzzle similar to the looks of an armored tank barrel was pointed at it. Unlike the normal tanks used in the military of the old ages, this tank's body parts were like human legs. It was like joining a large gun to the lower part of a human body, but it was obvious that this wasn't a human body. Although it looked like it, this was a mechanical AI tank. It could move across the battlefield with 16 times the speed of a normal tank, and it carried firepower that was more than 100 times greater than a military olden days tank. It was violet with a shade of blue. Right now it was pointed at the rock in front, ready to blast it apart. Blue, red, and purple rays of light could be seen gathering at the muzzle from every direction. Sir Young, we've loaded it with the 5 different mixtures of energy crystals. It should be able to cause at least 1,000% more damage than it used to. A man wearing a green spectacle without any temples spoke from the side. It's in him. Good. Let's get it over with, Young answered with a solemn voice. But Sir Young, with this amount of energy packed together in one, we're walking through uncharted territories. We don't know if the MN glass walls will be able to contain the force and residual impacts of the blast, the scientist said with a tone of urgency. The other scientists in the vicinity had looks that suggested that they agreed to the man's statement, but they didn't have the guts to voice out their thoughts unlike him. It's impossible for me to do this on the surface without arousing suspicion. The MBO will probably send someone to investigate, and I don't need those clowns sticking their nose into my business. It can only be done here. As Young came to this conclusion in his mind, he spoke. The energy compressor has been amplified? He asked. Yes, the scientist answered. The nanites' reorganization have been upgraded to the latest version? Young asked again. Yes, Sir Young, but... Before the scientist could complete his statement, Young interrupted him. Carry on with the experiment. The tone of his voice left no room for negotiation or argument. The scientist nodded with a defeated look and turned to face the glass wall. Fire the L-Mecha cannon after the countdown from 5, he shouted out. The other scientists within the room had expressions of discomfort when they heard that, even though they were trying to hide it. 5. The scientist started counting down. 4. 3. As he was counting down, the purplish, red, and blue rays converging around the muzzle of the cannon increased exponentially, gathering an immense amount of energy to its tip. 2. 1. Fire. Immediately after the scientist counted down, completely the rays of energy that had accumulated on the muzzle finally shot out. Zwun, it traveled in a straight line towards the green rock and arrived before it in an instant. The circular multicolored energy that shot out made contact with the rock, and something marvelous happened. The circular energy blast that was contained to the size of a football earlier started expanded upon making contact. Zwarnen. The scientist's eyes widened as the energy kept expanding till it covered half of the entire space within the glass walls before. Boom. It exploded with unfathomable force, carrying a destructive wave of energy that spread across the surroundings. The entire vicinity was blasted into smithereens, including the glass walls. Chapter 61. Boom. It exploded with an unfathomable force, carrying a destructive wave of energy that spread across the surroundings. The entire vicinity was blasted into smithereens, including the glass walls. They were supposed to repair themselves whenever they were damaged, but they were blasted to pieces before the energy even made contact. The energy raged across the vicinity for a few more seconds before the place became calm again. The small mist slowly began to dissipate. But even with everywhere becoming calm, the environment was riddled with destruction. Everything was in shambles. Pieces of equipment blasted to pieces, same with the scientific AIs. The mecha cannon that fired the energy had melted to the point that only half of the legs were left. The upper part where the cannon was joined to was nowhere to be found. As the mist dispersed completely, corpses with incomplete body parts could be seen scattered across the place. Limbs missing body parts sprawled across the place. Black blood splattered across the walls. It was obvious that the blood was burnt due to the immense radiation from the energy blast. The roof was almost blasted open completely. Surprisingly, a man in a blue suit stood opposite where the blast occurred. Not a single blood stain or speck of dirt could be seen on his suit. He was as neat as ever, his looks contracting with that of the environment. This was none other than Young, and his face was still laced with coldness and aloofness even after seeing the destruction around him. It still didn't crack, eh? Young stared at the green rock positioned in place. Just like him, the rock didn't have a single scratch on it after the immense explosion. "Jack, we're going to have to move to the next facility," Young stated as he turned around. The scientist wearing spectacles was right behind him. He also didn't have a single scratch on his body. "All right, Sir Young," he answered with a sigh after looking around. Not a single scientist survived. They were all torn apart by the energy. "What a waste of good brains," he sighed internally again. Swoosh. All of a sudden, a dark silhouette streaked towards them from the other end of the room and arrived before Young. The man that appeared before them had a buff build and a half-green mask covering his face. "Young Master Young, I found his whereabouts," the man spoke. Young's expression slightly changed when he heard that. "You know what to do. It must be done immediately before that woman is alerted," Young replied with a cautious look. The man nodded and turned around to leave. "Eden." Before he could leave, Young called out to him, "If that woman catches you, you'll die," Young stated with a heavy expression. "Be as quick as possible if you want to survive, because even I cannot save you if she's involved. And besides, if you fail, you don't need to be alive. You're better off dead," Young said while walking forward. Even with the mask on his face, it was obvious that Young's words had struck fear into his heart. He nodded and streaked out of the room, leaving behind shadowy after images. "Jack, get the rock, we're leaving," Young commanded as he walked forward. Gustav was currently standing behind one of the last buildings that led to the forest region. He stared at the wall behind the building with a smile hung on his face. "You've kept me waiting for too long." Finally, Gustav muttered with a look of excitement. A black figure that looked like a serpent was crawling on the wall. The difference between this and a normal serpent was the size and some other body differences. The length was about 7 meters and its width was comparable to 20 able-bodied men joined together. Its head had a red line cut across it, and its tail was like that of a scorpion's. The tip of its tail was extremely pointed and dark purple. A level 3 Savarinia serpent mixed breed. Defensive scales that can bounce off the 90% of physical force thrown at it, and it also has a deadly venom in its tail. Gustav analyzed the mixed breed. He had researched about mixed breeds enough to recognize this one at first glance. The mixed breed who noticed Gustav right from the time he appeared here finally leaped out. "Tum." Gustav was still on the ground, so the serpent was practically leaping downwards. The speed of the serpentine mixed breed was fast enough to make it cross over 70 feet in a single second. Gustav activated dash and ran towards the left. Swoosh! While dodging the body of the serpentine mixed breed, he transformed into the mutated bull. After sliding forward for a bit, the serpentine mixed breed paused and twisted its neck area towards the side to stare at Gustav. It was staring at Gustav, wondering why he was no longer looking human. Gustav didn't give it the chance to think for too long before dashing forward again. His speed was still greater than that of the serpentine mixed breed, and he arrived in front of it while swinging his fist towards its head. Shwai! The serpentine mixed breed threw its tail forward towards Gustav in response. Gustav noticed the tail coming and swerved towards the left to dodge while still moving forward. He arrived at the left side of the snake and threw his fist towards its neck area. Bang! Gustav's fist landed on its body, but he was the one who was thrown backward. Ugh! Gustav exclaimed in pain as his body was blasted several feet backward. Looks like I didn't research properly. 90% of the force is actually redirected towards the attacker. Gustav figured this out after receiving the full brunt of his own attack. The pain was still coursing through his body as he wondered how his punch was so painful. The serpentine mixed breed didn't wait for Gustav to stabilize himself before swinging out its tail again towards him. The speed of the tail happened to be faster than the serpentine's body movement as a whole. Gustav's body was still moving backward from the force of the first attack. Before he could stabilize himself, the tail was already a few inches from making contact with his face. Swoosh! Using his quick reflexes, Gustav grabbed onto the tail from both sides and used it to push himself backward. SHHHSSHH. His feet slid across the ground as the tail pushed him backward. Venom have permeated host system. Toxin immunity has been activated. Gustav saw the notification appear in his line of sight just as he let go of the serpentine mixed breed tail. Looks like even touching its tail is dangerous. But not for me. Gustav secretly thanked his stars for the toxin immunity. The serpentine mixed breed thrust its tail forward again, trying to pierce Gustav, but this time Gustav jumped backward, dodging its range of extension. SSHHHSSS. He slid backward by few feet after landing. He had distanced himself from the mixed breed by about 600 feet now, which bought him about 2 seconds to think. Normal physical attack will be useless, so I have to mix it with that. 0 seconds. Immediately after dash ended, Gustav activated sprint and ran dash towards the serpentine mixed breed again. The mixed breed, who was wondering why the human didn't die from touching its tail, swung out its tail again. The tail was sweeping towards Gustav from the left. Tum! Gustav jumped high up and landed on the large tail. Atomic disintegration. Gustav's hand was coated in a white glow as he ran across the body of the serpentine mixed breed. Chapter 62. Gustav ran across the body of the serpentine mixed breed with hands coated in white light. The serpentine mixed breed swung its tail upwards, trying to throw Gustav off balance. Instead of losing his balance, Gustav used the force to propel himself forward. He leaped more than 5 meters across the air. His body descended with his glowing white fist outstretched. Bang! Gustav's fist landed on the head of the serpentine mixed breed. The large creature's head shook slightly. Unlike before, Gustav was only thrown back a little by the force because the white light annihilated most of the force that was supposed to be sent back to him. Gustav landed back on his feet after making a low grunt. The atomic disintegration was only powerful enough to disintegrate part of the force, which meant he would still receive damage from any successful attack against the serpentine mixed blood. The serpentine mixed breed only received 10% damage. In fact, it hardly received any damage at all because apart from sending back physical force, it still had hard scales that would protect it normally. Gustav dashed towards the side again and punched towards the left eye of the serpentine mixed breed. Gustav was almost twice as fast as the creature, so it didn't notice the fist until it was about 10 inches away from its eyes. The serpentine mixed breed opened its mouth wide. As Gustav's fist was about to make contact with its eyes, he suddenly felt danger. Tum! He immediately leaped upwards as a pillar of purplish light shot out of the serpentine mixed breed's mouth. It missed Gustav's feet by an inch. The creature didn't wait for Gustav to descend from the air before raising its head to face upwards and fired the beam again. Gustav looked down while being in midair and noticed the beam headed for him. He twisted his body towards the left, dodging the beam as he controlled his body to descend faster. The beam passed by his side, but the intense amount of heat it carried slightly burnt a hole in his cloth around Gustav's left rib area. The creature noticed it missed Gustav and shot out the beam again severally. Thwai, 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 thwai. It looked as if Gustav could fly with the way he kept twisting his body in midair to dodge the beams as he descended. He dodged every single one of them. Sprint has been deactivated. Dash has been activated. Blam! He landed on the ground and dashed towards the left again, dodging the purplish beam. Although his speed wasn't as great as before when using dash, it was still a bit faster than the attacks of the serpentine mixed breed. Thwy, thwy, swy, swy. It shot out beams while also sending its tail towards Gustav. Gustav was able to dodge every single beam and its tail sweep, but he couldn't find a way to attack the creature. He could only attack its body if the tail swept towards him, but it was useless since 90% of the attack would be redirected back towards him. From Gustav's observation, the places that could be attacked on the creature's body were its eyes, but Gustav couldn't get close to its face. Gustav thought about the best way to deal with the creature without having to harm himself while dodging the attacks. After dodging for a few more seconds, his eyes widened as he realized something. Don't I just need to penetrate it? Immediately this thought came to his mind. Gustav turned around and distanced himself from the creature. Dash has been deactivated. Gustav was now more than 500 feet away from the creature. His body reduced in size as he transformed back into human form. The serpentine mixed breed slithered towards him violently. Mutated Bloodwolf transformation has been activated. Gustav's body transformed rapidly. Brown furs grew out of his body as his eyes turned dark red, glowing with viciousness. He grew to over 2 meters tall with a robust figure similar to that of a bear. For sharp claws about 9 inches long protruded from both of his paws. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr serpentine mixed breed to pieces. His eyes were fierce, and he felt a wave of bloodlust trying to take over his sense of reasoning. This time his sweatshirt couldn't take his buff build and started tearing apart. Only his pants were left in a better state. The serpentine creature headed for him earlier paused and stared at him for a while. It was just like when Gustav was transformed into the mutated bull when fighting the blood wolf. The serpentine mixed breed also had a look of confusion, wondering why the human would be able to transform not just once but twice. Gustav calmed his raging bloodlust as he recalled what needed to be done. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr same when using bull transformation, but he was more flexible in this state. Dash has been activated. Gustav activated dash again, boosting his current speed by a lot. Thwy, thwy, thwy. The serpentine mixed breed started shooting out those purplish beams again. The danger he felt from it was just as much as before, so he still dodged. He was already running out of energy after activating dash and sprint severally, so he quickly headed for the body of the snake since he couldn't move towards its head. Shwai. The serpentine mixed breed swung its tail out towards Gustav again. This time Gustav didn't even try to dodge the long tail headed for him. Atomic disintegration has been activated. Gustav raised his right paw up as the tail headed for him. His foreclaws were coated in whitish light. He gathered power into his right arm before swinging it down towards the incoming tail. The intensity at which his claws descended upon the tail of the serpentine mixed breed, causing a ripping sound to echo across the place. Shinning. His claws made contact with the tail and smoothly severed it from the body of the serpentine mixed breed. Bam! The tail fell to the ground and dark purplish blood jetted out it. Shulkikihis, the serpentine mixed breed, made a loud and painful noise that was similar to both hissing and screeching. Host has learned the skill. Slash. Gustav noticed the notification, but he didn't focus on it. While the serpentine mixed breed was thrashing around in pain, Gustav dashed towards it again. It noticed Gustav and shot out another beam, but now it was slower than before, which gave him the chance to dodge easily while closing in on it. Swoosh! Gustav arrived before the huge face of the serpentine mixed breed, whose mouth was still wide open. Before it could shoot out another beam, Gustav's claws were already swinging upwards towards its face from below. Slash has been activated. Chapter 63. Slash has been activated. Gustav's claws tore 4 deep gashes across the jaw area of the serpentine mixed breed, causing its head to tilt upwards as it screeched in pain. Blood kept jetting out, but Gustav didn't stop there. as his left arm was already swinging from the side with a follow-up attack. Slash, 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 slash. Gustav's claws furiously slashed across the neck and face of the serpentine mixed breed. Dark purplish blood splattered across the place as he kept slashing non-stop. Cuts that were deeper than 30 inches could be seen all over its upper body. Claws mark that made the internal part of its head visible. Gustav suddenly jumped up while raising both arms before swinging them down with full force. His claws from both paws formed a white visible arc of light as it came down upon the head of the serpentine mixed breed. Slash. The head of the serpentine mixed breed was cleanly severed in two. Plop. Half of its head fell to the ground as purplish blood jetted out from its incomplete head like a fountain. Gustav's body was already bathed in purplish blood, but he wasn't bothered. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr it by the neck and brought it towards his face before taking a bite. Crunch! Gustav bit the rest of its head off, causing more showers of blood. You killed a Savarinius serpent mixed breed. 7,000 EXP. The notification brought him back to reality as he stopped himself before taking another bite of the Savarinius serpent mixed breed. Another beast transformation bloodline found. Does host wish to add Savarinius serpent transformation to beast transformation bloodline? Yes/no. Gustav stared at the notification for many seconds while still holding onto the neck of the serpentine mixed breed. He could taste the blood of the creature in his mouth, and surprisingly it tasted good. He already guessed that this was because of the bloodwolf transformation. He felt disgusted by the fact that he would look like that if he transformed to the Savarinius serpent mixed breed, but upon thinking about it for a few more seconds he concluded. Its scales are capable of reflecting and sending back 90% of any physical attacks. It can shoot out a deathly toxic beam from its mouth. Its only flaw is its appearance, Gustav analyzed. He was only able to cut the scales open with the power of the Bloodwolf and atomic disintegration combined. It didn't work for the bull transformation because he was using fists. The compounded force was easier to bounce off even when he coupled it with atomic disintegration, while for the Bloodwolf, his claws were able to cut fast and deep enough with the help of atomic disintegration to penetrate the scales. The scales were responsible for bouncing off physical attacks, but when it was cut through, its ability to perform that function was discarded. Gustav had already analyzed all these after his first exchange with the serpentine mixed breed. No matter how disgusting, power is still power, Gustav concluded. He never knew when such power would come in handy, so decided to go accept it. Yes, Gustav called out in his mind. Extracting Savarinius serpent, extraction process, 1%. Around midnight, Gustav got back to his apartment. He immediately went to the washroom to take a bath after removing his pants. SSHHHSSS. SSHHHSSS. The sound of dripping water could be heard inside the bathroom. Gustav stood underneath the shower as he analyzed the previous battle. The water falling on his head gave him a cool and refreshing feeling, which made him take note of some things that he didn't think of earlier. To think it would still take me that long to defeat a level 3 mixed breed even after I have increased in strength, Gustav said internally. Now he understood that not everything was all about being high-leveled, because originally he should be able to defeat this mixed breed with ease, yet it took him time, and he would have even been defeated if he didn't know what to do. He now understood that different kinds of bloodlines abilities could really give boons to the owner. A level 4 mixed breed might not be able to defeat the Savarinius serpent mixed breed due to its attributes. He had decided not to be careless when facing any creature with a bloodline because there were a lot of bloodlines out there. There might be some that gave the owner ridiculous boons which could help them in defeating creatures higher rank than them. Gustav finished taking his bath and went back to the living room. He moved towards his reading chair after putting on pajamas. My webboard is about 3 inches away from where it used to be. Gustav stared at the circular webboard on his reading table with a contemplative look. I'm pretty sure it was 3 inches towards the left before. Gustav was able to notice this minor detail. He suddenly became cautious and started checking around his apartment. He checked every part of his room, bathroom, toilet, kitchen, etc. After checking everywhere and seeing nothing else looking suspicious, Gustav moved back to his living room. Maybe I'm just imagining it. Gustav held his chin as his suspicion eased up a bit. The security measures of this area is pretty bad, so maybe I should put personal security measures in place. The next day, Gustav woke up by his usual time. He finished preparing and headed for school with Angie. Of course, Angie kept questioning him about the night before and whether he even left his apartment. She knocked severally and stood in front of his apartment till around 11 in the night before her mother called her to come back to the apartment. Gustav only told her he left for his work earlier, and she didn't need to bother about it. Gustav didn't even mention anything about killing another mixed breed. He decided it was better kept under the wraps, but he also figured Angie's father should receive a report. Angie kept staring at him weirdly inside the bus, thinking he was telling a lie, but after seeing the serious expression on his face, she didn't know what to believe. Should I tell him? I heard sounds coming from inside his apartment yesterday night? Angie wondered internally. She didn't get enough time to ponder about it before they got to their destination. Gustav wasted no time in getting off the bus and bidding farewell to Angie. Angie decided to throw it to the back of her mind and head towards school. They'll argue about this with him later. The school was pretty much lively today, but boring to Gustav. All of his classmates were excited about the upcoming exchange event. Some perverted guys were already thinking about how they would get hookups with girls from the other schools. It was a 3-day event, which meant accommodations would be put in place. Also, in their free time, they would be able to mess around and do whatever they liked. Gustav only shared their enthusiasm for the event because he was going to be traveling past the border. Oh, I forgot to ask Angie if their school was also invited. Gustav remembered this and decided to ask Angie later. The day went by uneventful again, but Gustav was already plotting something internally. Just like that, another 3 days had gone by and it was Monday again. During this time, the wariness Gustav felt when he entered his apartment the other day had faded away. But even with that, he still decided to install security protocols in his apartment. Gustav was walking towards his apartment from the stall with 2 boxes in his hands. Miss Amy gave him a free day because of the security protocols he wanted to install in his apartment. He got to a corner in the 2nd Street and was about to turn left when he suddenly felt a sense of dread. He paused and looked left and right repeatedly but couldn't see anything around him. He turned around. Still, there was nothing. Just as he wanted to step forward, thinking it was a misinterpretation of his perception. "Don't move, kid," he heard a voice behind him. Chapter 64. The voice sounded really familiar to him. The person had appeared behind him almost in an instant. Gustav's face darkened. "I didn't even sense his approach, even though he's within my range of perception. For your own good, you shouldn't move." The person spoke again. "This is the same guy from the forest?" Gustav recalled. Now that Gustav wasn't as weak as he used to be, he could sense how dangerous this person was. He now understood that if the system didn't teleport him home, there was no way he would have managed to escape. Sprint has been activated. Gustav wasted no time in activating Sprint. He didn't have to think twice about it. All his senses were telling him right now was run. Gustav crossed over 150 feet in one movement after taking a step forward. Wind blew fiercely as his figure streaked across the street. Instead of running towards the neighborhood, he was running towards where he was coming from. Gustav turned his neck around to look back as he crossed the 200 feet. Immediately after turning around, saw a palm covering his entire line of sight. "This time I won't mess around with you." The voice sounded out again as Gustav's vision was blocked completely. Grab. It was way too fast for him. Even though he was currently using Sprint, this person was like 10 times faster. Before Gustav could even react to the grip, his body was lifted in the air. "Don't blame me for doing this. You're a disobedient kid." Those words drifted into his ears before he suddenly felt his body descend with speed. Bang! His head slammed into a very hard surface, causing him to pass out immediately. The person who had done the deed grabbed Gustav by the head and lifted him. On the street, a man in a tight-fitted black bodysuit and a half-green mask could be seen lifting a boy off the ground. The ground had cracks across the surface, and a small pool of blood could be seen in the middle of the cracks. The man was currently holding onto Gustav, who had blood smeared all over his face and blood kept streaming down his head. His eyes were closed and his arms were stationed on both sides of his body without making any movements. It was obvious that he had passed out. Did I use too much power? He passed out pretty quickly, the man said internally as he stared at Gustav while still lifting him above the ground. He was really feeling a sense of urgency and wanted to get things done as quickly as possible. Well, fix him with healing meds. Time to get out of here. After he came to this conclusion, he pressed a green button placed on the left side of his head. The people on the street currently were surprised to see what was happening. They only saw both of them appear out of thin air due to their speed, and before they knew it, the boy's head had been slammed onto the hard ground, causing it to split open. A black car that was similar to the length of a limousine drove into the street in midair and stopped before the man holding onto Gustav. The doors opened up, and he threw Gustav in before entering himself. Whoosh! The car blazed across the street after turning around. In a few seconds, they were out of sight. Chatter! 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 Dash, what's happening? Dash, who was that boy? Dash, he looked familiar, but everything happened too quickly. I couldn't catch a glimpse of him very well. Dash, we need to call the police. Voices of the people that witnessed the scene could be heard. Truly, none of them were closer than 500 feet from the scene of the incident. Apart from that, it didn't even take up to 1 minute before the scene ended, so they were not able to see Gustav's face. This street was only 2 streets away from where Gustav's apartment was located, so it also happened to be among where he protected during the night. Had they seen him clearly, they would have recognized him. 30 minutes later, inside a dimly lit room, a person was strapped to a long bed-like chair. A black cover cloth was placed on this person's head, and metallic hands that extended from the bed-like chair held onto the person tightly, preventing any chance of escape. At the left corner of the room, 2 men in tight, fitted black bodysuits stood side opposite each other. They seemed to be in a discussion, and the man wearing a half-green mask held a purplish and blue helmet. This helmet had some aqua-colored stones embedded all over its surface which crackled with electricity. We can't waste time in projecting and watching his memories since it happened 3 months ago. The man in green mask spoke with a tone of urgency. Boss Eden, I can only suggest that we make use of the truth function and ask him specific questions to make our interrogation faster. The other man suggested. Let's go with that. We don't have the time to be sorting through his memories. We'll ask him specific questions about that day. Although he might become a vegetable due to his young age, we will have to risk it. No matter how powerful she is, she won't be able to trace who turned him into a vegetable. The man with the green mask, known as Eden, agreed. After concluding, they walked towards the person strapped on the chair. After arriving before him, Eden grabbed the piece of clothing and pulled it off, revealing the face of a blonde teenage boy. The teenage boy, who was obviously Gustav, stared at the man with a cold look. Good thing you're awake now. Looks like the healing med worked just fine. If you had just listened and didn't run, I wouldn't have had to crack your skull open, he said with a slightly bitter tone. Who are you, and what do you want? Why are you after me? Why did you break into my apartment? Gustav threw a series of questions at the man with a look of wariness. You don't need to know who I am. All I want is for you to tell me what happened 3 months ago in that forest mountain area. I'm sure you already remember me from that day. Eden spoke while bending down to stare into Gustav's eyes. Now tell me what happened to the mountain. There is no way you didn't witness what happened since you were in your school uniform. It means you were there the whole night. Especially after I found out your residential address is far from that place. I don't even care about how you evaded me during these 3 months. All I want to know is, what happened in that mountain region? Eden stared intently at Gustav as he questioned. Gustav stared back at him for a few seconds before speaking. Beats me. I have no idea about what happened to the mountain, Gustav said with a look of certainty. Why kidnap me when you should be calling a neurologist to investigate? Gustav asked with an irritated expression. Oh, you're not meant to answer until after wearing this, Eden replied while raising the helmet. What is that? Gustav suddenly became wary upon seeing the helmet cackling with electricity at the top. Chapter 65. Oh, This is something that will help you in spouting the truth. Eden pushed the helmet towards Gustav's head and tried to put it on for him. I won't let you. Gustav shifted his head towards the side, causing the helmet to be placed on his neck. Behave yourself. I don't have the time to mess around. Eden shouted out and shifted the helmet towards Gustav, who was still moving his head around trying to dodge it. Grab. Eden grabbed Gustav's chin with his left hand and forcefully held his head in place before placing the helmet on his head. NH. Nhuro. GRHH. Gustav muttered some incoherent words while trying to move his head, but it was to no avail. The grip was so powerful that he could hardly make noises. He could already tell what the function of the helmet was, but he was powerless to try and stop it. No, 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 no. Gustav kept screaming inwardly. He didn't want the secret of the system to be exposed, but he wasn't strong enough. This was the brain tweak device, and one of its functions was to force a person to answer truthfully to any questions asked. Even if he decided to transform, he wouldn't be able to break through the bonds holding him down. Even if he could break through, the man in front of him was more powerful than he was, and that would also reveal his ability. Activate it, Eden said to the man beside him. The man nodded and clicked on a button behind the helmet. Crackle, crackle, crackle. The electric sparks on the helmet grew in number and size, causing Gustav's eyes to widen in pain. In a few seconds, his eyes turned listless. Eden stared at Gustav's expression, which looked like he was awake, but also asleep. The brain tweak device is currently functioning, the man beside him stated. What is your name? Eden asked. I am Gustav Oslov, Gustav answered like a robot. He looked like a puppet at this moment. Good, it works with no issue. That's the brat's full name, the man beside him confirmed. Now tell me what happened in that mountainside 3 months ago. Tell me what happened from your time of arrival in that forest, Eden commanded. Gustav, whose eyes still looked like that of a lifeless puppet, started speaking. On that day, I went to the forest to go commit suicide. In the neighborhood, more than 30 minutes had gone by, and people were still talking about what happened. Angie was walking across that particular street, trying to trace Gustav. She had been waiting for Gustav to arrive since she saw him leaving his apartment earlier. Since he said he was going to get some things at the stall that was only 3 streets away, she expected him to have arrived by now. She noticed the people outside their houses talking to some cops. Why are the cops here? She wondered as she moved closer to check out what was going on. So you can't describe the face of this person? Officer, not only were we distant from the scene, but they were also moving too fast for us to see their figures properly, and when they stopped moving, a car arrived instantly to pick up the kidnapper and the boy. Angie could hear the discussion between the police officer and one of the people in the neighborhood who witnessed the crime. Kidnapper? Angie moved closer to listen properly. So from his figure, you could tell that it was a kid. Yes, officer. The boy that was taken away was certainly a teenager. And from their movements, the boy included, they are mixed bloods? They are definitely mixed bloods. The boy also suddenly appeared just like the man, so it's very obvious that the both of them are mixed bloods. At this point, Angie was already starting to have a bad feeling in her heart. She kept listening, feeling like some important information was coming next. So there's no way to identify this boy? Officer, if you were here when it happened, you will understand what I mean. Their figures were practically blurred due to their speed. With the way the situation is, we might not be able to do anything since we can't get a single form of description. Officer, if I remember correctly. Although they moved quite fast, I'm sure the boy had blonde hair. Yes, blonde hair. They moved about quite fast, but I could at least point out that color. Immediately after, Angie heard that her mind froze. Blonde hair? Although it could be another person, since having blonde hair wasn't exclusive to a single person, but Angie knew that only one person in this neighborhood had blonde hair, and was also a mixed blood that surpassed her in the speed she had always been proud of. She started panicking. Oh my God, what do I do? She didn't try to go meet the police because she knew that in this situation they wouldn't be able to do much or do anything at all. The cops around here were weaker than Gustav, so for him to be taken meant there were stronger forces at work here. She kept thinking of who she could go meet. She suddenly remembered something. He always headed for the Gami dojo after school to train with his teacher. She's the only one I can go meet, Angie remembered asking Gustav why he never came home with her. At first, he didn't want to tell her, but after she disturbed him for an answer repeatedly, he finally gave in and told her about the dojo. Angie quickly sped off towards the nearest bus station to hitch a ride. This was the first time she was feeling so tensed. She didn't know if she would be allowed to enter into the dojo, but she had no choice but to try. 5 minutes later, Angie alighted from the bus, and ahead of her was a huge 700-floor-story building. She quickly ran towards it. The 4 bulky men in front of the entrance noticed her and called out to her to stop running. Angie paused her steps in front of them and politely asked for permission to go in. Young girl, I don't know who you are and where you have come from, so I will explain to you. This is the Octavia Group business building. Without proper identification, you can't get in. Please, it's an emergency. I just need to inform a teacher here about her student. Angie pleaded. I'm sorry, but I cannot let you in. Call that teacher on your communication device. I don't have any means of contacting her. Please let me in. It's urgent. Angie kept begging, but the guards wouldn't listen to her. They asked her to leave, but she didn't comply. She kept begging and shouting. Her voice even attracted the people within the vicinity. Some of them that were coming out from the building had looks of disgust and suggested for her to be thrown far from the premises. Even with the looks of contempt and disgust, Angie kept begging. The guards couldn't take it anymore. One of them moved forward to grab her when a voice was heard from behind. Falco, what's happening? A smooth feminine voice made him pause. The guards turned around and noticed the lady in red walking out of the building. Young miss, the guards bowed slightly to her as she walked over. Chapter 66. This young lady is disturbing the peace of surroundings. She keeps asking to go in without an identification, the guard said to the lady in red that had just arrived. Please, I need to see her. It's urgent. The more time we spend here, the more dangerous it becomes. Angie shouted out again. The guard turned around to grab Angie again after she shouted that out. Falco, wait. The lady in red commanded. She walked towards them and stood in front of Angie. Who is this person you're referring to? She asked. Maybe I can help you pass the message across, she proposed with a friendly look. She's a teacher here. Her name is Miss Amy. Angie responded to the lady. The guard's eyes slightly widened. She's looking for young miss? The guards were surprised by this revelation. Angie noticed the reactions of everyone around her were a little bizarre, including the lady who was staring at her with a contemplative gaze like she was trying to figure out whether they had met before. Tell me, kiddo, why are you looking for me? Angie heard the female ask her this, and her mouth hung open in surprise. You're Miss Amy? Angie asked. A few minutes later, Angie had finished explaining everything that happened to Miss Amy. Miss Amy's expression was surprisingly looking bright after hearing that. She had a smile hung on her face as she stared at Angie. The guards felt a chill run down their spine when they saw the smile. Everyone knew that she wasn't the type to smile unless something disastrous was about to go down. Angie, that's your name, right? Miss Amy asked. H&M? Angie nodded in affirmation. What are we going to do, miss? She inquired. Not we. Miss Amy answered. Suddenly a chill spread through the air as Miss Amy's smile grew broader, which made Angie look confused. She wondered why Miss Amy would be smiling, but she could undeniably feel the chill spreading across the place. Go home. They'll take care of this, Miss Amy said, and walked forward. The ice-cold tone at which Miss Amy spoke left no room for debate. Although Angie was still worried, she had no choice but to comply. She stared at Miss Amy's back, which was currently getting farther and farther away. Miss Amy, will he be all right? Angie shouted this out subconsciously. Miss Amy paused in front of her hoverbike before tilting her head towards the left to stare at Angie. I don't know, but for the sake of the captives, he better be all right. Miss Amy answered. The amount of bloodlust her words exuded caused the guards along with the people in the vicinity to shiver subconsciously. Miss Amy sat on her bike and started the engine before zooming off. A few minutes later, Miss Amy arrived in front of a well-secured and barricaded area. This place seemed to be swarming with different kinds of security operatives that moved around the vicinity. Most of them were laced in armor like uniforms. The space within the walls that barricaded this environment was as wide as a small city. The tallest building in Plankton City happened to be located inside this well-guarded stronghold. Miss Amy stared at the rocket-shaped building up ahead that happened to be so tall that its top couldn't be seen. She sighed in dissatisfaction before moving towards the entrance of the stronghold, where tons of guards clad in intimidating-looking sci-fi-like armors could be seen. Inside the dark room where Gustav was kept captive, Eden stood in front of Gustav, who had just finished speaking. "Is that all?" he asked. "Yes, that was everything that happened during the time I was within that forest." Gustav's eyes still had a listless look as he spoke. Now we know everything that happened," Eden said with a low tone. Miss Amy stood in front of a large room filled with holographic computers and a multitude of technological pieces of equipment. A group of people in orange uniforms could be seen moving from place to place within this room. Some were handling the computer devices which showed the state of different places in the planet. Beside Miss Amy was a man clad in dark orange uniform with black stripes. He sported light green hair and was pretty short in height, around 45 in height. "To what do I owe this visit, Amy?" he said with a playful tone while chuckling. "I don't have time to mess around. I need you to use the Orion satellite to track someone for me," Miss Amy stated without extending any greetings. So sharp, so straight to the point. "But seeing your urgent looks, ha ha ha, I have to use this to my advantage and make a deal with you first." The man smiled sheepishly as he spoke. Miss Amy kept glared daggers at him before answering. "Fine. It's time to get this kid back before that woman figures out anything. Well, decide what to do next after giving young Master Young feedback about his narrative," Eden said while pulling off the helmet from Gustav's head. "Canfer, take him back to his apartment," Eden called out to the other man. The man nodded and started unhooking the metallic holds strapping Gustav to the chair. After he completed that, he tapped Gustav. "Get up, kid," he demanded, but there was no answer. "Hey, kid, get up," he called out again, but there was no response once again. The man stared at Gustav's face in confusion and noticed that his eyes were the same as before. Listless. "Boss Eden, I think this one is gone," Canfer said while raising his hand and placing it in front of Gustav's face. He waved his hand repeatedly, looking for signs that Gustav had regained his normal consciousness, but there was no reaction whatsoever. He grabbed Gustav's arm, raised it, and dropped it. The arm dropped back towards Gustav's side like he was dead. "He's underage, so it's normal for this to happen. Just get him out of here," Eden said with a slightly annoyed tone. The man nodded and lifted Gustav upon his right shoulder before walking out the exit. Inside the technology room, Miss Amy was still speaking to the short man. "Accepted. Just find him for me," Miss Amy said to the man, who showed a shocked expression on his face. "You accepted without even listening to my demand first?" The man said that with a dumbfounded look. "What if I make unreasonable demands?" he questioned. "Do not waste my time, Zach. Find him for me, or do you wish to die?" Miss Amy's face darkened as she threatened him. Chapter 67. The smile on the man's face disappeared as he noticed her glare. "Ahem, give me his life signs," Zach demanded. "His life signs." Before Miss Amy could complete her statement, she heard a ring. Trang, trang, trang. Miss Amy took a small button from her sleeves area and placed it on the left side of her head. Miss Amy's eyes slightly widened in astonishment as a masculine voice drifted into her mind. "Gustav? Are you all right?" she voiced out with a worried tone. "Good. Where are you?" she replied with a tone of relief. Zach watched from the side with a confused look. He could already guess that she was communicating with the person she came to search for, which had him wondering what exactly happened in the first place. "All right, I'm coming," Miss Amy said, and removed the button from the side of her head before turning around. "The deal is off, Zach," she said, and walked out of the room. Zach stared at her back and sighed. "So much for getting my hopes up. I thought I could finally get her to do something for me." Eden stood at the left corner of the darkroom. He was speaking to someone with a communication button glued to the side of his head. These days, easy communication was possible with the use of these technological buttons. Calls could be answered with a thought, so there was no need to bring out the device. It was mostly used on the battlefield for communication. A person could be fighting battles and receiving instructions at the same time. Also in this age where bloodline abilities existed, some mixed bloods could listen to people talk from afar, but with this, it would be impossible for someone to eavesdrop on your conversation since the voice of the person on the other end was going directly into your mind and not your ears. Yes, young Master Young, we just finished interrogating him using the brain tweak helmet. Yes, he recounted the whole train of events. Yes. I was surprised also. Everything adds up now. Yes, young Master Young. I will give you the full details once I return. Eden's voice could be heard multiple times. Should I also inform him about how that kid happened to use a speed that was on par with a serial-ranked mixed blood? According to the information gathered, he's only an F grade. How would he be able to use such power? Eden wanted to ask Gustav about this, but there was no time for that. Well, he's now a vegetable. This practically spells the end for him, so I don't think Master Young needs to know, Eden concluded. All right, young Master Young, I will be leaving the facility in a few. Understood. He voiced out before the call ended. After the call ended, Eden walked towards the bed-like chair that Gustav was strapped on before. He arrived before it and reached out his hand to grab the helmet when, boom, the wall behind him blasted apart. Huh. Eden turned around in shock to look behind him, but he saw nothing. He suddenly felt wary. Who's there? He shouted out while looking left and right. Show yourself. He shouted out again as his arm suddenly turned shadowy and he raised it. I will kill you if you don't reveal yourself before me. He started walking forward slowly with a look of caution while looking left and right severally. Sometimes he would even rotate just to check behind him, but even after doing that for more than 1 minute, he still didn't see anyone. What is going on? There's no way the wall just exploded on its own. He could see the bright corridor from the space within the broken wall up ahead, but he couldn't understand how the wall could explode by itself. It didn't explode by itself. I'm responsible for that. He suddenly heard a cold feminine voice whisper into his left ear. Who are? He quickly turned around while speaking only for him to notice a fist headed for his face. Bang! A loud bone-cracking sound rang out upon collision, causing Eden's face to cave in as the fist buried itself 2 inches deep into his face before throwing him backward. Whoosh! The half-green mask on his face broke to pieces, revealing a half-burnt face. Splurt! Part of his face cracked open as blood came spilling out of his face while he was being catapulted backward in midair. He couldn't even scream in pain due to the destruction of his face. Bang! His body slammed into the wall and broke through it. Bang! 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 His body kept crashing through the walls in a straight line until it finally came to a stop several hundred feet ahead. From within the darkroom, the body-shaped holes within the walls could be seen. Swoosh! A red figure dashed through the holes with intense speed, causing more parts of the walls to break and expanding the size of the holes. The figure came to a stop before the body of Eden, which was laying on the floor with a sunken face. A fountain of blood was spilling from his face and head. The figure, who happened to be Miss Amy, raised her foot and stomped down upon his face again. Bang! The sound of flesh being mangled and hard skull cracking resounded across the place as blood spilled across the floor. You really have guts. For you to lay hands on my student. Miss Amy's voice was cold as ice. How dare you? Stomp! How dare you? Stomp! How dare you? Stomp! How dare you? This time she raised her foot very high and stomped on his chest. Bang! Her foot crushed his sternum and down his lungs, causing another splatter of blood. Miss Amy raised her blood-soaked foot and placed them on the floor back. Her blue shoe was soaked in blood. She noticed the man was no longer moving and squatted to pick him up. She held onto his head that was battered beyond recognition and raised it. She picked a pill out from her storage device and looked for his mouth, which was almost missing due to the disastrous way his face looked. She placed the pill in his mouth. You're not dying on me yet. You still have a lot of pain to go through at my hands, Miss Amy voiced out while dragging him by the hair towards the darkroom where Gustav was held captive. Eden's face was slowly recovering, along with his chest and lungs. His body was healing up at a very fast rate, as it would seem Miss Amy gave him a very high-graded healing medicine. Miss Amy dragged him back into the room and lifted him. "You will tell me who you work for and why you came after him," Miss Amy stated with a threatening tone. Eden was starting to regain consciousness after the initial beating. He shivered upon seeing her face. Ash-colored hair, beautiful but very cold looks. It reminded him of young Master Young. "It's her." Finished. A cold stream of sweats ran down his bloody back. "Before you tell me what I want to hear," Miss Amy said while dashing towards the wall on the right and holding onto his hair. Swoosh! She arrived before the wall and paused her movement before smashing his face into it. Bang! Chapter 68. Bang! Eden's face crashed through the wall, causing debris to scatter across the place. Miss Amy dragged him by the hair again and dashed towards the wall on the other side. Bang! She slammed his face into the wall again, causing it to collapse entirely, but she still wasn't done yet. Swoosh! Bang! Swoosh! Bang! Swoosh! Bang! Swoosh! Bang! Swoosh! Bang! She repeated the same actions severally until there were no walls left within the vicinity. Only corridors that led to different places within the facility could be seen. But it would seem Miss Amy wasn't satisfied with the pain she had inflicted on him. She clenched his hair tight and used it to lift him. Eden's face was practically crushed again. His teeth were missing. His nose completely caved into his face. Both eyes were swollen and bleeding. Miss Amy brought out another pill and placed it in his mouth. He started healing up once again. Immediately he regained consciousness. He started pleading for mercy, but Miss Amy acted like she couldn't hear him. There were no longer walls, but the ground was available. She lifted him high before slamming his face down with intensity. Boom! This time it sounded like an earthquake as the ground split open. Cracks covered a radius of over 500 feet from the point of impact. Miss Amy lifted Eden by the head again and raised him high up before slamming his face back onto the ground. Boom, 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 boom. The entire structure shook like it was going to come crashing down as Miss Amy slammed Eden's face into the ground repeatedly. A small pool of blood was already forming within the 3-feet-wide hole that Eden's face had created from being slammed on the ground repeatedly. Miss Amy raised Eden by his hair again and placed another healing pill in his mouth. "Please, Jusd KLLME," Eden voiced out hoarsely. "Kill?" Miss Amy said rhetorically. "It's too early for that. I haven't even started." Miss Amy as she dragged him across the ground towards the bed-like chair on the left side of the room. "You strapped him on this chair, didn't you?" Miss Amy asked another rhetorical question before she lifted him again and placed him on the chair. Eden was like a weak and defenseless chicken before her. Miss Amy strapped him to the mechanical chair that was glued to the hard ground. She held onto Eden's head again and stared into his eyes with a devilish smile on her face. "How do you think it would feel to lose a body part and have it regenerated only for you to lose it again and have it regenerated once again? Wouldn't the repetition of this procedure be magnificent?" Eden's eyes widened in fear as he heard that. "No, please, no." He started begging once again. Miss Amy acted like she wasn't listening and moved towards his right. She grabbed his right arm and released it from being strapped. "Why don't we start with this one?" Miss Amy said with a smirk. "No, please doing." Eden tried pulling his arm back as he begged. Miss Amy smiled once again while her grip on his arm became stronger. "No, please doing TDO." Eden was still trying to plead with her when Miss Amy pulled his arm with force. Yank! The sound of tendons and cartilage forcefully being ripped apart reverberated across the room. "Kyrar!" He screamed out in pain like a pig being slaughtered as he stared at his right shoulder, which was spraying out a fountain of blood. His shoulder was missing an arm. Miss Amy raised the arm, she tore off his shoulder and threw it towards the side. "Kyrar!" Eden was still screaming in pain. He had never felt such pain since his arm had never been ripped off his shoulder before. Snot and tears filled his face. It was obvious that he was going through indescribable pain at this moment. He wanted to pass out to escape from feeling such pain, but he couldn't. He could only keep screaming out as he watched his shoulders squirt out more and more blood. "Oh, this is just the beginning. There's more to come," Miss Amy said as she walked over to Eden's left side. Eden, who was still in pain, slowly turned his head towards the side as he felt his left arm being gripped. His eyes were filled with dread as he saw Miss Amy holding onto his left arm. He wanted to plead again, but before he could, Miss Amy pulled his left arm with force again. Muscles and ligaments disconnected as his left arm was pulled out of its sockets. "Kyre!" Eden screamed out again after losing his second arm. Blood squirted out of the left side of his shoulder. Miss Amy threw the second arm away and moved towards his legs. In Gustav's apartment, he sat on his bed with a small triangular-looking device in his hand. "Why is Miss Amy taking so long?" Gustav questioned no one in particular with a low tone. "If she plans to check the place out, it should only take a few minutes." "It's been almost an hour now," Gustav muttered. He looked around with a contemplative expression. To think ID actually be taken because of the mountain phenomenon? Gustav's mind recalled the last day's event. After his head was slammed to the ground by Eden, he pretended to have passed out. The man was stronger than him, so trying to escape by using more power or transforming would only reveal more of his secrets, which would end up in disaster for him. Since he would still be taken either way, he decided to pretend that he had passed out and made use of that opportunity to observe where he would be taken to using his perception. His perception granted him the ability to see his surroundings with his senses even if his eyes were closed. He memorized the path that the car took, the turning, and movements. None of them escape his senses. When he was strapped on the chair and noticed the brain tweak helmet, he thought that would be the end for him since he might end up spewing the truth about everything. To his surprise, something happened when the helmet was placed on his head. Host brain functions are being hijacked by external forces. Mental fortitude needed for blocking mind invasion. 25. Host has acquired enough mental fortitude to block mind invasion. Mind invasion has been successfully blocked. Chapter 69. When Gustav saw the notification, he was extremely shocked, but he was quick-witted enough not to show the expression of surprise on his face. He decided to act like his mind was actually being manipulated. Gustav pretended to be mind-controlled by the brain tweak helmet. The information he gave them about the mountain phenomenon was the same as what the locals around there gave. He only added more details to it than they did. He mentioned that there was an outburst of purplish electricity that sent destructive charges across the body of the mountain after the star slammed into it. Since he happened to be closer to the mountain than others, Eden didn't have a shred of doubt in Gustav's words. Gustav was able to easily deceive them with his actions due to the fact that they were in a hurry to get the information out of him and return him to his apartment. If they had studied him a bit more, they may have figured it out. Alas, they didn't. He could tell that they were tensed, but he didn't know why. Gustav also faked brain damage so they wouldn't feel cautious towards him. It would have been weird if he wasn't affected, since the brain tweak helmet could even turn adults as old as 22 years into vegetables. He was able to get a proper outline of the facility and the routes that led him there when he was being taken back to his apartment. He also sensed a destructive force within the facility that made him feel really suspicious towards the abductors. They were already suspicious for trying to abduct him in the first place and successfully doing that now. He could already sense that they probably worked for a big shot in the city, since they could go around abducting people however they wanted. Gustav was afraid they knew about the system earlier, whenever he recalled almost being abducted 3 months back, but now he had confirmed that they didn't know anything about it. They were only suspicious about the energy that radiated from the mountain after the impact of the blast that led to it being halved. Gustav knew the energy probably came from the system which was now inside him, so it would definitely be a disaster if he revealed that. Gustav thanked his stars that he stuck with even distribution. If not, his mind would have probably been taken over. The destructive force he sensed within the facility made him feel more suspicious about these unknown people. Immediately, he was returned to his apartment. He contacted Miss Amy. He was surprised that she already knew that he was abducted, since it happened only about 2 hours ago. He explained the situation to her and where the facility was located. He had been returned to his apartment an hour ago, which was also when he spoke to her. Gustav had tried contacting Miss Amy again after this, but he couldn't connect to her device. Gustav decided to open the system interface to check on his attributes. Host attributes: Name, Gustav level, 5 class, EXP, 1850/25000 HP, 320/320 energy, 150/150 attributes: Strength, 34 perception, 34 mental fortitude, 34 agility, 34 speed, 34 bravery, 34 intelligence, 34 charm, 34 attributes points, 24. He had evenly distributed all the points and kept stored some for emergencies, so even if his mental fortitude wasn't up enough, he would have been able to add more points to it in that situation to save himself. Doesn't this mean mental fortitude can protect from anything that has to do with mind control? This made Gustav see mental fortitude in a new light. He didn't see it as a necessary stat beforehand, yet he placed points in it like the others. Now that he understood what it could do, he realized that it could turn out to be a very useful attribute. Protection for the mind was absolutely necessary. His perception and intelligence had also helped him today. He was able to properly analyze the routes taken to get to the facility due to his perception, while his intelligence helped him in memorizing every single turn and swerve. He was even able to calculate the distance from the street he was abducted down to the facility. The facility happened to be an underground laboratory located towards the east of the city. That particular area wasn't too far from the mountain he usually visited when he tried committing suicide. He was able to easily describe how to get there to Miss Amy. Gustav checked some other things before he stood up and walked towards the door. He was tired of sitting around. The suspense was already killing him. He wanted to know what was happening and if Miss Amy had checked out the facility like she said she would. He had decided he would visit that mountain region again. His apartment door slid open, and he walked out. Immediately he arrived in the corridor, he saw Angie approaching his apartment from the other end. "Gustav," Angie voiced out in confusion as she stood in place with a surprised look. "Hey, Angie." Gustav kept walking forward with a smile on his face. Angie ran forward and grabbed hold of Gustav. "Are you okay? Did they harm you?" she asked while checking Gustav's body for injuries. "I'm okay." Gustav smiled warmly while answering. "Thanks for informing my teacher, Angie," he added with a look of gratitude. Angie was smitten by his charming smile, which was very rare. She stared at him for a few seconds before turning her head towards the side in embarrassment. "It's nothing," she replied. "How did you know I was abducted? How did you escape from there?" Both of them asked at the same time, with Gustav being the former and Angie being the latter. "Hee." Angie smiled sheepishly. "They'll answer first then." Gustav was about to reply to her when he sensed something and stared at the stair area. Calm, 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 calm. The sound of heels colliding with the ground could be heard. A female in black top and blue jeans entered into the corridor from the stairways. She noticed the duo and started walking towards them. Angie also heard the sound of footsteps and turned around to see who was approaching. "Miss Amy." Gustav and Angie voiced out together. Miss Amy arrived before them and also stared at Gustav in a similar way to how Angie did. "Are you okay?" she asked with a worried tone. "I'm fine, Miss Amy. Nothing of consequence happened," Gustav answered. Miss Amy nodded with a relieved look. "Did Miss Amy go shopping?" Angie voiced out with a look of bewilderment as she stared at Miss Amy's, which was different from what she saw her clothed in earlier. "Oh, I couldn't help it since my wares had stains. Although the color of the stains has certain similarities with the color of my initial clothing, it won't be sensible to keep wearing it," Miss Amy explained. Gustav didn't have an idea of what Miss Amy was putting on earlier, so he didn't make much of her words. "Gustav, let's go. We have to talk," Miss Amy said and walked forward. "Angie'll see you later." Gustav turned around and walked towards Miss Amy. By Gustav." Angie waved at Gustav as she spoke. Miss Amy got to Gustav's door and it slid open for her without having to use keys. Gustav's mouth hung wide open as he saw that. His jaw was nearly falling to the floor. "How did you get it to open without a key?" Gustav asked Miss Amy after entering his apartment. Your security details suck over here. A burglar could easily break into your home, Miss Amy answered bluntly. Looks like the installments of security protocols are really needed, Gustav sighed internally. By the way, Miss Amy, how did you know that this was my apartment? You've never been to my apartment, Gustav asked with a dumbfounded look. Are you sure about that? Miss Amy smiled with a playful look. Ugh, Gustav exclaimed with a look of confusion. Anyways, we have other important things to discuss. Miss Amy's voice suddenly became solemn when she said this. Chapter 70. Did you discover the place? Gustav asked while sitting on the couch. Miss Amy also sat opposite him. Did your abductor look like this? Miss Amy brought out a rectangular device and tapped on the screen. A holographic image of Eden wearing his half-green mask was displayed. Yes, that's him, but he wasn't alone. There was also another. Before Gustav could complete his sentence, another holographic image was shown. This time another face was displayed. It was a man sporting yellow hair and beards. Gustav recognized this man as the second person within the room, who also happened to be inside the car that they used in transporting him to the underground facility. Yes, he's also one of them, Gustav stated as he pointed at the projected image. Good. Looks like the hospital didn't receive the wrong guests. On hearing that, Gustav could already sense that something must have gone down. Miss Amy, what did you do? Gustav asked. Nothing much. Just put a group of people in a state where they'll never be able to bother anyone again. While Miss Amy was speaking, more projections were displayed one after the other. Gustav was only able to recognize 3 earlier. The rest of the 7 were unknown to him. Looks like Miss Amy went on a full rating session. That's probably why she came so late. Gustav was gobsmacked as he came to this realization. Miss Amy, did they say anything about who sent them? Gustav inquired. About that, it's a very tricky person. This person happens to be the brother of Hung Zhou, your former classmate. His name is Young Zhou, Miss Amy revealed. Also the first son of the Zhou technological industry that helps the Embio create their weapons, armors, and other tools, Miss Amy added. Gustav's eyes slightly widened in realization. Is it because of that? Gustav asked. No, far from it. He has no idea about what you did to Hung Zhou. You just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, Miss Amy responded. Gustav sighed in relief after hearing that. But if I wasn't there, he'll probably not receive this power, Gustav shrugged internally. There was no way he would change his decision of going to that mountainside to experience the same thing all over again if he traveled back in time. He's the type that is very shrewd, cunning, and meticulous. Even though I found out that he's responsible for this, there is no way to deal with him on the surface, but I have managed to place the Embio on his tail, so he will have to lay low for now, Miss Amy said. She noticed the slight look of distraught on Gustav's face and added, You don't have to worry about it. Such people won't come after you again, I can guarantee that. You just have to focus on your path. I won't deal with your peers for you, but when it comes to big bullies like these old bastards that are beyond you, they'll step in. Miss Amy assured Gustav. It's in him. Thanks, Miss Amy. Gustav smiled while replying. Miss Amy returned the smile for a few seconds before her face became solemn again. I found what you were referring to, and just as you said, it was truly something dangerous, Miss Amy stated. What is it, Miss Amy? Gustav asked with an intrigued look. That facility has been experimenting on mixture of energies. Miss Amy replied. Mixture of energies? Gustav asked with a confused look. Are you aware of the different energy crystals mined underground? Miss Amy asked. Yes, my FA. The man who biologically brought me into this world works as a miner, so I know a bit about it, Gustav said with a contemplative look. There are several hundred mines all over the world, but only 7 different energy crystals exist which can be used for different technological purposes. According to a ton of research, due to their diversity, Gustav's eyes suddenly widened when he got to this point. Mixing them can cause a catastrophic disaster since they happen to be unstable together. Miss Amy nodded in affirmation. It is against the law to mix them. A crime punishable by death, because experiments like that have been performed in the past which led to the destruction of an entire city, Miss Amy said with a dark look. Gustav gasped in shock upon hearing that. Destruction of an entire city? It was nearly unbelievable for him, but he had to believe it since it was coming from Miss Amy's mouth. In this age, destroying an entire city was practically an impossible feat because different technological security protocols are put in place. If an alien race tried to invade in this age, they would find out that the Earth is not an easy target. This made Gustav believe it to be impossible for a city to be destroyed no matter how powerful the cause was supposed to be, but now his beliefs were being overthrown again. The amount of energy that is created from mixing the power contained within the energy crystals is capable of causing extinction to all races living on Earth, and according to the Slarkovs, this was one of the reasons for the destruction of their planet thousands of years ago. Miss Amy explained with a slightly worried tone. Gustav couldn't imagine how powerful such energies were after hearing this, but it made him wonder why anyone would try mixing them since they have been proven to be dangerous. This is his doing, but the reasons for him mixing those energies are unknown. It might be a little hard to tackle him since he's very good at hiding his tracks. Even this incident cannot be connected to him. Miss Amy said, "Then what do we do now?" Gustav asked. "Not we. This matter is none of your business anymore. It's up to the MBO to investigate now. I'm only telling you about it because you kind of got involved." "He's probably forgotten about you now since you have nothing to do with whatever he's planning," Miss Amy said. Gustav nodded in understanding to her response. "You did well in quickly informing me about the location. Now those people will owe me a favor. I should take you out on a date again," Miss Amy voiced with a smile. "But he'll probably be busy for a while. I don't mind. Whenever you're ready, Miss Amy." Gustav was now feeling slightly relieved, but there was still a nagging feeling deep down like he could sense that this still had a kind of connection to him. He decided to place that feeling behind him. Chapter 71. The next morning Gustav woke up at his regular timing. He still couldn't forget yesterday's events, but Miss Amy's assurance made him feel less cautious. He still went for his usual neighborhood watch last night, even though he knew mixed breeds were unlikely to show up and truly none showed up. Gustav got prepared for school and left with Angie once again. Several minutes later, he had arrived at the school and headed for the kitchen to start his morning job. Boss Danzo had noticed the changes in Gustav, him growing colder and colder by the day. Although he never showed Boss Danzo that side of him, Boss Danzo was vigilant enough to notice this. He decided he would talk with Gustav one of these days. During the school activities, the students were paired in the training hall to spar with one another due to the upcoming exchange event. Gustav was paired with a student of Class 3D and who also happened to be a D-grade mixed blood. The spars were for the purpose of training them, and it started last week. Gustav had been revealing a bit of his prowess since last week. He had been drawing attention to himself for some reason which was unknown to everyone. He would never use any bloodline abilities when sparing, but he would dodge every single attack from whoever he was sparing with, causing them to feel humiliated about not being able to touch him. Although he didn't reveal much, this was enough for him to draw attention to himself since a mixed blood below F grade was able to avoid attacks of other higher graded mixed bloods. Everyone was busy with their sparring partners. There were many small circles in the hall. Everyone faced the sparring partner they were paired with. Inside the circles, the small circles were barricaded by a blue glow that blocked the attacks from phasing out of the space so it wouldn't hit another person by mistake. There were hundreds of this small circle, and each one was as spacious as a boxing ring. Gustav was also within one, positioned at the west corner of the hall. Swoosh! Swoosh! Gustav swerved left and right as he dodged the circular balls of energy that were being sent at him. Swoosh! He sped towards the left side of the student he was sparring with. The student reacted by covering his right hand in a glow of blue energy before punching towards Gustav. Swoosh! Gustav dashed towards his back, causing the student to miss him. The student turned around and swung his hand towards the back, hoping to hit Gustav, but he was still too slow as Gustav dodged him. Gustav dashed towards his front again. The student was already starting to get frustrated, so he summoned a lot of blue energy balls. Pop, 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 pop. 20 of them appeared in midair and surrounded him. He sent them towards Gustav with speed. Each energy ball was the size of a fist. Swai. The balls traveled towards Gustav, cackling with a force that could easily tear a hole through a person. 5 of them appeared in front of him at the same time, only leaving small gaps between one another. Gustav moved towards the middle with speed as turned his body sideways. Since he didn't want to make use of dash, his normal speed was only a bit faster than these balls, so trying to dodge all of them seemed pretty impossible. Size manipulation. Immediately after Gustav said this in his mind, his body suddenly deflated. His chest and back seemed to be caving in like a balloon that was being deflated. He became so flat that he could be mistaken for plywood. Doing this, while his body was turned sideways, allowed the balls to miss him and keep flying forward. The student's mouth was wide open after seeing Gustav's performance. How was he able to do that? He wasn't the only person that saw Gustav do that. 2 more people whose circle happened to be positioned on their right saw him. Time to change partners, their instructor voiced out. The one on the left side was glaring at him with a weird look. Hey, Gustav, why don't you spar with me this time? The male student proposed. He was about 62 and had short orange-colored hair. He had a slim body but a very confident look that was very similar to a prideful one. His eyes were sharp and brimming with life. This student was the person Gustav had been aiming for since, reasons unknown. He wanted to spar with him to check out something, but he needed him to be the one to propose the spar. Charles Yemen. Gustav stared at him for a bit before answering. Sure. Gustav walked towards his circle while the student that was sparring with Charles earlier walked towards Gustav's former sparring partner. Hoo-hoo, Gordon, watch how it's done. It's pathetic that you can't land a single hit on him, Charles said with a look of contempt as he stared at Gustav's former partner. Some of the students around had left, forgotten that they were supposed to be sparring right now. They decided to watch Gustav spar with Charles. Gustav not receiving a single hit since this training started was already ticking off some people, but they didn't have the guts to go meet Gustav and ask for a sparring session with him, due to fear of being humiliated. Now that they were seeing that Charles and Gustav were about to spar, they believed Gustav would receive his retribution today. The blue glow barricaded the circle, and they were surrounded by it. The same happened in the other circles, but some of them seemed to be focusing on Gustav's and Charles' circle instead of sparring. Surprisingly, their instructor, who happened to be watching from afar, didn't say anything about the students not minding their business. You seem to have gotten quite stronger recently. Hoo-hoo-hoo, that won't help you in this situation. Charles laughed like a maniac as he stared at Gustav. Is this speech necessary? Don't waste my time with it. Gustav voiced out with a look of boredom. Charles' face twisted upon hearing that. Then I won't show you any mercy. Charles spoke with a dark look and dashed towards Gustav. Red electric snakes danced around his body as he arrived in front of Gustav after taking only a single step. Gustav swerved towards the side, dodging him by only a small margin. Charles noticed that he missed. He reacted by raised his hands and conjuring red electricity in between his palms before extending them out towards Gustav. A thick snaky line of red electric charges blasted towards Gustav. This was when Gustav finally activated dash. The speed of the snaky electricity was extremely fast, and he had already predicted this, so he activated dash before Charles was able to send it out. Gustav turned towards the right, causing the red electricity to miss him by only a few inches, but that wasn't all that happened. Gustav could feel a force from the electricity that was pushing him backward. He distanced himself more from the electricity charge while dash was still activated and felt the force decrease. If not for his activation of dash that practically slowed down everything around him, that force would have knocked him backward. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.